The galaxy had known peace for millions of years under Eldar dominion, their advanced civilization spanning countless worlds across the stars. Their psychic mastery and technological prowess had elevated them to heights unimaginable to lesser species, creating a golden age that seemed destined to last forever. Yet within this perfection lay the seeds of absolute catastrophe, growing like a cancer through generations of increasing decadence and hedonistic pursuit. The Eldar Empire at its zenith represented the pinnacle of galactic civilization. Their webway allowed instantaneous travel between distant worlds, their wraithbone cities floated gracefully through space, and their mastery of psychic arts made them seem like gods to the primitive species that cowered in their shadow. On countless maiden worlds, Eldar society flourished in an endless cycle of artistic creation, philosophical discourse, and technological advancement. Their lifespans stretched across millennia, giving them time to master skills and accumulate knowledge that would have taken lesser races entire civilizations to achieve. But immortality bred complacency, and complacency bred excess. As generations passed, the Eldar found themselves increasingly drawn to ever more extreme experiences. What had once been refined artistic appreciation gradually transformed into obsessive pursuit of sensation. Their psychic sensitivity, which had made them masters of the warp, now became their greatest weakness as they sought increasingly intense emotional and physical stimulation to feel truly alive. The pleasure cults began as exclusive societies within the upper echelons of Eldar civilization. These groups, initially focused on exploring the boundaries of sensation and experience, attracted the most influential members of society. Artists pushed their work to disturbing extremes, philosophers delved into forbidden concepts of pain and pleasure, and the wealthy competed to host increasingly elaborate and depraved gatherings. What started as sophisticated exploration of sensation gradually devolved into something far darker. Within the towering spires of Camorra and across the maiden worlds, Eldar society began to fracture along lines of indulgence. Those who warned against the growing excess were dismissed as primitive or jealous, unable to appreciate the sophisticated pleasures being explored. The pleasure cults grew in number and influence, their membership swelling as more Eldar abandoned restraint in favor of absolute hedonism. Torture became art, murder became performance, and suffering became the ultimate aesthetic experience. The psychic emanations of this growing depravity began to coalesce in the warp, creating ripples of corruption that spread far beyond the physical boundaries of Eldar space. Each act of excess, each moment of exquisite cruelty, each exploration of forbidden pleasure sent psychic shockwaves through the immaterium. The warp, already a chaotic realm of emotion and thought, began to warp and twist around these concentrated emanations of hedonistic energy. For thousands of years, this psychic pollution accumulated in the depths of the warp. The emotional resonance of billions of Eldar engaging in increasingly extreme acts of pleasure and pain created a growing vortex of corrupted energy. This nascent consciousness fed on every scream of ecstasy, every moment of exquisite agony, every boundary crossed in the name of ultimate sensation. It grew stronger with each passing century, its hunger becoming more focused and terrible. The Farseers and other Eldar psychers began to detect disturbing signs in their divinations. Visions of a great darkness stirring in the warp became increasingly common, though few could interpret their true meaning. Those who spoke of coming catastrophe were largely ignored by a society too intoxicated by its own pleasures to heed warnings of doom. The pleasure cults had become too powerful, their influence too pervasive, for any voice of reason to penetrate the haze of indulgence that had settled over Eldar civilization. As the 30th millennium drew to a close, the psychic disturbance in the warp reached critical mass. The accumulated centuries of Eldar excess had created something unprecedented in the history of the galaxy. A new chaos god was about to be born. The entity that would become known as Slaanesh stirred in the deepest reaches of the immaterium, its consciousness coalescing from the psychic emanations of an entire civilization's fall from grace. The birth scream of Slaanesh tore through reality itself with a violence that defied comprehension. In a single, catastrophic moment, the barrier between the material universe and the warp was shattered across a vast swathe of space. The psychic shockwave ripped through the galaxy, its epicenter located in the heart of the ancient Eldar Empire. Stars were extinguished, planets were consumed, and entire systems simply ceased to exist as the newborn Chaos God's first breath devoured everything within its reach. The Eye of Terror opened like a wound in the fabric of space-time, a permanent gateway between the material realm and the chaos-infested warp. This massive warp storm, spanning thousands of light years, consumed the Eldar homeworlds and the heart of their empire in moments. The psychic backlash of Slaanesh's birth was so intense that it created a permanent scar in reality, a region where the laws of physics held no meaning, and the nightmarish realm of chaos bled through into the material universe. Across the galaxy, every Eldar felt the moment of their species' doom. The psychic birth scream of she who thirsts reached into the soul of every member of their race, marking them forever as the property of the Dark Prince. In that instant, billions of Eldar died as their souls were torn from their bodies and devoured by the hungry newborn god. Those who survived found themselves forever changed, their psychic essence partially consumed, and their souls marked for eventual consumption by the entity their civilization had unwittingly created. The newborn Slaanesh turned its attention to the Eldar pantheon with predatory hunger. These ancient gods, sustained by millions of years of Eldar worship and belief, represented a feast of divine essence that the Dark Prince could not resist. One by one, the Eldar gods fell to Slaanesh's insatiable appetite, their divine forms consumed, and their power absorbed into the growing might of the newest chaos deity. Asurion, the Phoenix king and father of the Eldar pantheon, was among the first to fall. His divine flames were extinguished as Slaanesh devoured his essence, consuming millennia of accumulated divine power in moments. Lilith, goddess of dreams and fortune, found her ethereal form torn apart by the Dark Prince's hunger. Kurnus, the hunter, was tracked down and consumed despite his attempts to flee through the deepest reaches of the warp. One after another, the gods who had watched over the Eldar for millions of years were destroyed, their divine essence becoming part of Slaanesh's ever-growing power. Only 3 members of the Eldar pantheon managed to escape complete destruction. Kine, the god of war and murder, fought with desperate fury against the newborn Chaos God. The battle between them raged across multiple dimensions of reality, their conflict sending shockwaves through both the warp and the material universe. Though Kine's martial prowess was legendary, he could not match the raw hunger and power of Slaanesh. The war god was shattered into countless fragments, his divine essence scattered across the galaxy. These fragments would later manifest as the avatars of Kine, allowing the god to maintain a diminished existence through multiple incarnations rather than face complete annihilation. Segorach, the laughing god and patron of the Harlequins, proved too elusive for even Slaanesh to catch. His mastery of trickery and illusion allowed him to dance between the spaces of reality, always staying one step ahead of the Dark Prince's grasping claws. The laughing god retreated into the deepest mysteries of the webway, hiding in places so obscure and well protected that not even a chaos god could find him. From these hidden sanctuaries, Segorach would continue to guide his followers and work against the forces of chaos, though his power was greatly diminished by the loss of most of his worshippers. Isha, the goddess of fertility and healing, faced a different fate entirely. As Slaanesh closed in for the kill, preparing to add her divine essence to its growing collection, an unexpected intervention occurred. Nurgle, the chaos god of plague and decay, had been watching the birth of his newest sibling with interest. Seeing an opportunity to claim a prize for himself, the plague god snatched Isha away at the last moment, spiriting her away to his garden in the warp. There, Nurgle imprisoned the Eldar goddess, using her as a test subject for his endless varieties of disease and pestilence, while also cherishing her as a beloved captive in his twisted version of affection. The immediate aftermath of Slaanesh's birth left the Eldar as a broken and scattered people. Their mighty empire was gone, consumed by the Eye of Terror, or abandoned as survivors fled in whatever ships they could find. The webway, once their greatest achievement, became a hunting ground where she who thirsts could pursue fleeing Eldar souls through the interdimensional passages. The surviving Eldar found themselves in a state of constant terror, knowing that death would deliver their souls directly into the maw of the entity their ancestors had created. The psychic mark that Slaanesh's birth had left on every Eldar soul meant that the normal cycle of death and rebirth was forever broken for their species. Where once Eldar souls had joined with the infinity circuits of their craft worlds or found peace in the afterlife, now every death risked feeding the insatiable hunger of she who thirsts. This terrible knowledge forced the survivors to develop new methods of protecting their souls, leading to the creation of spirit stones and other psychic safeguards that could preserve their essence from Slaanesh's hunger. The emergence of Slaanesh as the fourth chaos god fundamentally disrupted the ancient equilibrium that had existed within the warp for countless millennia. Where Khorne had claimed dominion over warfare and bloodshed since the first sentient being raised a weapon in anger, where Tzeentch had woven schemes and plots since the first mind conceived of change, and where Nurgle had spread decay and renewal since the first organism died and fed new life, Slaanesh arrived as an entirely new force with hungers that none of the Elder powers had fully anticipated. The Dark Prince's relative youth among the ruinous powers created a unique dynamic within the great game of chaos. Unlike the three Elder gods who had spent eons establishing their territories and spheres of influence within the warp, Slaanesh possessed an almost childlike eagerness to explore every sensation and experience that existence could offer. This youthful exuberance manifested not as innocence, but as an insatiable appetite that drove the newest chaos god to constantly push boundaries that even the other dark powers had learned to respect. Khorne, the blood god, had initially viewed the birth of a fourth sibling with the same murderous contempt he directed toward all existence. The Skull-Crowned deity's domain encompassed the pure essence of violence and martial prowess, concepts that had remained relatively unchanged since the first caveman bludgeoned his neighbor with a stone club. Khorne's rage was direct, honest in its brutality, and focused entirely on the spilling of blood and the taking of skulls. The blood god's relationship with Slaanesh quickly developed into one of particular antagonism, as the Dark Prince's approach to violence incorporated elements that Khorne found deeply offensive to his warrior's code. Where Khorne demanded that blood be spilled in honest combat, Slaanesh delighted in the slow torture that preceded death, savoring each moment of agony as much as the final killing blow. The Dark Prince's followers would spend hours perfecting the art of inflicting pain, treating their victims' suffering as a canvas upon which to create masterpieces of sensation. This approach to violence disgusted Khorne, who saw it as a perversion of warfare's pure purpose. The blood god's brass legions and Slaanesh's hedonistic hosts clashed repeatedly in the warp, their conflicts creating storms of psychic energy that rippled across multiple dimensions. The fundamental difference in their approaches to conflict meant that Khorne and Slaanesh could never truly ally, despite both gods benefiting from mortal warfare. Khorne's followers sought glorious death in battle, while Slaanesh's devotees pursued the perfect sensation that combat could provide. This philosophical divide created a permanent rift between the two powers, with Khorne viewing Slaanesh as a corruption of everything warfare should represent, while the Dark Prince saw the blood god as hopelessly crude and limited in vision. Tzeentch, the changer of ways, approached the newest chaos god with the calculating interest of a master strategist encountering an unknown variable. The Lord of Change had spent millions of years weaving plots within plots, creating schemes so complex that their ultimate purposes remained hidden even from the other chaos gods. Tzeentch's domain encompassed mutation, sorcery, and the endless possibility of change, concepts that required patience and long-term planning to fully exploit. The Architect of Fate's relationship with Slaanesh proved more complex than the straightforward antagonism that existed between the Dark Prince and Khorne. Slaanesh's pursuit of perfection often aligned with Tzeentch's goals of change and transformation, as the Dark Prince's followers frequently sought to reshape themselves and their surroundings to achieve their idealized visions. The pursuit of ultimate sensation sometimes required the kind of radical alteration that fell squarely within Tzeentch's sphere of influence. However, the Dark Prince's impulsive nature and hunger for immediate gratification often conflicted with Tzeentch's preference for elaborate, long-term schemes that might take centuries to reach fruition. The changer of ways found Slaanesh's unpredictability both useful and frustrating. The Dark Prince could be counted upon to disrupt carefully laid plans through sheer impulsiveness, yet this same chaotic energy could sometimes advance Tzeentch's goals in ways that rigid planning never could. Their relationship became one of cautious cooperation punctuated by bitter rivalry, as each god sought to manipulate the other's followers, while preventing their own schemes from being derailed by their siblings' interference. Nurgle's reaction to Slaanesh's birth differed markedly from that of his brothers. The plague god, whose domain encompassed disease, decay, and the cycle of death and rebirth, possessed a patient, almost grandfatherly demeanor that contrasted sharply with the violent nature of his gifts. Nurgle had spent eons perfecting his plagues and watching civilizations rise and fall in endless cycles, developing a philosophical acceptance of entropy that made him the most stable of the Chaos gods. His relationship with the Dark Prince became characterized by a mixture of paternal affection and deep concern. The plague god recognized in Slaanesh a kindred spirit in some ways, as both deities appreciated the intimate relationship between pleasure and pain, life and death. Nurgle's diseases brought suffering, but they also brought a strange form of unity to those who shared his gifts, creating communities bound together by their common afflictions. The plague god's followers often found a perverse joy in their condition, celebrating their decay as a form of liberation from the fear of death. This twisted happiness resonated with Slaanesh's pursuit of sensation, creating opportunities for cooperation between their respective cults. However, Nurgle's possession of Isha created a permanent source of tension between the two gods. The plague god's imprisonment of the Eldar goddess in his garden served multiple purposes beyond mere spite towards Slaanesh. Isha's divine essence provided Nurgle with a constant source of renewal and hope to corrupt, while her presence allowed him to test his diseases on a being capable of healing from even the most virulent plagues. The knowledge that his youngest sibling coveted this prize added an element of satisfaction to Nurgle's already considerable pleasure in his captive. The Dark Prince's domain represented something entirely new within the pantheon of Chaos gods. Where the three elder powers had claimed relatively straightforward concepts, Slaanesh's sphere of influence encompassed the complex duality of pleasure and pain, perfection and excess. This unique position allowed the Dark Prince to corrupt mortals through avenues that the other gods could not easily access. Khorne required warriors to fall to his influence, Tzeentch needed scholars and sorcerers, and Nurgle attracted the desperate and diseased. Slaanesh, however, could corrupt anyone capable of feeling sensation or harboring ambition. The pursuit of perfection proved to be one of Slaanesh's most effective tools for spreading corruption throughout the galaxy. Artists seeking to create the ultimate masterpiece, warriors training to achieve perfect technique, and scholars pursuing absolute knowledge all risked falling under the Dark Prince's influence. The line between healthy ambition and obsessive perfectionism proved dangerously thin, and Slaanesh delighted in guiding mortals across that boundary through subtle encouragement of their existing desires. Musicians who spent endless hours perfecting their compositions might find themselves drawn to increasingly complex and emotionally intense pieces, eventually creating works that could drive listeners to madness or ecstasy. Sculptors pursuing the perfect form might begin incorporating living subjects into their art, treating flesh as just another medium to be shaped according to their vision. Generals seeking tactical perfection might sacrifice countless lives in pursuit of the flawless battle, treating their soldiers as pieces on a game board rather than living beings. The Dark Prince's influence extended beyond mere artistic or martial pursuits into every aspect of mortal existence, where the desire for improvement could take root. Merchants sought perfect profits, lovers pursued ideal relationships, and rulers dreamed of flawless societies. Each of these aspirations contained the seed of corruption that Slaanesh could nurture into full-blown obsession. The god's followers learned to recognize these seeds of ambition and carefully cultivate them, often spending years guiding a single target toward damnation. Slaanesh's hunger for new experiences drove the Dark Prince to constantly seek out novel forms of sensation and corruption. Unlike the other Chaos gods, whose domains had been well established for millions of years, Slaanesh remained in a state of constant growth and exploration. Every new species encountered, every unique form of consciousness discovered, every previously unknown method of experiencing pleasure or pain represented potential expansion of the Dark Prince's power and influence. This insatiable appetite for novelty made Slaanesh perhaps the most actively expansionist of the Chaos gods. While Khorne was content to fuel existing conflicts, Tzeentch preferred to manipulate events from behind the scenes, and Nurgle patiently waited for civilizations to decay naturally. Slaanesh actively sought out new territories to corrupt and new minds to twist. The Dark Prince's cults received constant encouragement to explore uncharted regions of space, make contact with previously unknown alien species, and experiment with forms of sensation that had never been attempted before. The demon legions that served Slaanesh reflected their masters' diverse appetites and youthful energy. Daemonettes, the most common servants of the Dark Prince, combined seductive beauty with deadly claws, embodying the duality of pleasure and pain that defined their patron's domain. These creatures could appear as the perfect object of desire to any observer, shifting their forms to match the deepest fantasies of those who gazed upon them. Their attacks inflicted wounds that brought as much ecstasy as agony, creating a feedback loop of sensation that could drive victims to beg for more even as they died. Fiends of Slaanesh represented the Dark Prince's appreciation for the hunt and the thrill of pursuit. These multi-limbed monstrosities combined incredible speed with a hypnotic musk that could entrance prey from great distances. Their attacks focused on capturing rather than killing, as they preferred to drag victims back to their master alive and conscious, ready to experience whatever exquisite torments awaited them. The creature's alien anatomy allowed them to experience sensation in ways that mortal minds could barely comprehend, making them ideal servants for a god whose hunger for new experiences knew no bounds. Keepers of secrets, the greater demons of Slaanesh, embodied their patrons' pursuit of forbidden knowledge and perfect sensation. These towering entities combined immense physical power with subtle psychological manipulation, capable of reading the deepest desires of any mortal and offering exactly what they most craved. A keeper of secrets might appear to a struggling artist as the perfect muse, to an ambitious politician as the key to ultimate power, or to a lonely individual as the ideal companion. Their true forms remained fluid and ever-changing, as they constantly sought new ways to perfect their ability to tempt and corrupt. The relationship between Slaanesh and the surviving Eldar remained one of predator and prey, with the Dark Prince viewing the scattered remnants of the species as both a source of sustenance and a reminder of past triumph. The god's connection to every Eldar soul created a constant psychic link that could never be fully severed, allowing Slaanesh to track and hunt the survivors across the galaxy. This eternal threat forced the Eldar to develop increasingly sophisticated methods of protecting their souls, leading to the creation of spirit stones, wraithbone constructs, and other psychic technologies designed to deny she who thirsts her prize. The Dark Eldar of Khorne represented a particularly complex relationship with their species' destroyer. These twisted survivors had chosen to embrace the very excesses that had birthed Slaanesh, using constant acts of torture and depravity to keep their souls from being consumed. Their society became a reflection of the pleasure cults that had originally corrupted the Eldar Empire, with each cabal and witch cult competing to devise ever more elaborate methods of inflicting suffering. The Dark Eldar's raids into real space served the dual purpose of gathering slaves for their arenas and feeding their souls with the pain of others, creating a sustainable cycle of corruption that both honored and defied their destroyer. The Craftworld Eldar chose a different path, embracing rigid discipline and emotional control to deny Slaanesh the psychic emanations that the god craved. Their path system channeled Eldar emotions into carefully controlled outlets, allowing individuals to experience intense feelings within safe boundaries before moving on to different aspects of existence. This approach required constant vigilance and self-discipline, as any slip into true excess risked attracting the Dark Prince's attention. The Craftworld Eldar's relationship with Slaanesh became one of eternal resistance, with every moment of their lives dedicated to denying their creator the satisfaction of claiming their souls. The Palace of Pleasure stands as the ultimate manifestation of Slaanesh's dominion within the roiling depths of the warp, a structure that defies both mortal comprehension and the basic laws of physics that govern the material universe. This impossible edifice exists simultaneously as the most beautiful creation ever conceived and the most horrifying nightmare that could torment a sentient mind. The palace's walls appear to be constructed from crystallized music, their surfaces resonating with harmonies so perfect they cause physical pain to those who hear them. The very stones seem to pulse with a life of their own, shifting between materials that mortal minds cannot properly categorize, sometimes appearing as polished marble veined with gold, other times manifesting as what looks like living flesh stretched taut over an architectural framework of bone and sinew. The palace's spires twist impossibly upward, their heights changing depending on the observer's perspective and desires. A warrior might see towers that resemble perfectly balanced weapons, while an artist would perceive them as brushes dripping with paint that forms new colors as it falls. The structure's geometry follows no earthly logic, with corridors that lead both forward and backward simultaneously, and staircases that ascend while somehow arriving at lower levels. Windows offer views into dimensions that exist only in the deepest fantasies of those who gaze through them, showing scenes of impossible beauty that gradually transform into visions of exquisite torment. The throne room at the palace's heart serves as the focal point for Slaanesh's power within the warp. Here, the Dark Prince holds court surrounded by an ever-changing assembly of demons, mortal supplicants, and captured souls from across the galaxy. The throne itself appears different to each observer, manifesting as their ideal of perfect authority and beauty. Some see it carved from a single massive pearl, others perceive it as woven from the silk of extinct creatures, while still others witness it as a living entity that responds to its occupants' every movement with subtle adjustments to provide absolute comfort. The floor of the throne room consists of a mirror-like substance that reflects not the physical forms of those who walk upon it, but their deepest desires and hidden shames. Supplicants approaching the throne find themselves forced to confront these reflections with each step, their journey becoming as much an internal exploration as a physical one. The ceiling stretches infinitely upward, decorated with constellations that form patterns representing every act of excess ever committed in the material universe, their light pulsing in rhythm with the collective heartbeat of all sentient life. Beyond the central palace, Slaanesh's domain extends through multiple regions that cater to different aspects of the god's vast appetite for sensation and experience. The Circle of Avidity represents the Dark Prince's hunger for material excess and the accumulation of perfect objects. This realm appears as an endless marketplace where the most exquisite items ever created or imagined are displayed for the admiration of visitors. Weapons of impossible sharpness and beauty hang alongside musical instruments that could drive listeners to madness with their perfect tones. Artworks that capture the essence of entire civilizations compete for attention, with jewelry crafted from crystallized emotions and fabrics woven from the dreams of dying stars. The merchants who operate within the Circle of Avidity are demons who have taken forms that embody the concept of desire itself. They appear as whatever the observer most wants to see, speaking in voices that promise everything while delivering nothing but deeper hunger. Their wares constantly shift and change, ensuring that no visitor can ever truly possess what they most desire. The moment someone reaches for a perfect object, it transforms into something even more desirable, creating an endless cycle of want that feeds directly into Slaanesh's power. The pathways through the Circle of Avidity are paved with coins minted from compressed greed, their surfaces bearing the faces of every mortal who ever sacrificed their principles for material gain. The air itself carries the scent of expensive perfumes mixed with the metallic tang of avarice, creating an atmosphere that simultaneously attracts and repulses visitors. Market stalls stretch beyond the horizon, their awnings made from banners that once flew over conquered worlds, now repurposed to advertise wares that no mortal currency could ever purchase. The Circle of Paramore represents Slaanesh's dominion over physical and emotional intimacy, manifesting as a realm where every form of attraction and desire can be explored without restraint. This region appears as an endless series of chambers, each one perfectly designed to fulfill the romantic fantasies of whoever enters. Some rooms resemble palatial bedchambers with silk sheets and golden fixtures, while others take the form of secluded gardens where impossible flowers bloom in colors that exist only in dreams of perfect love. The inhabitants of the Circle of Paramore include demons who embody idealized forms of beauty and attraction. These entities appear as the perfect partners for any visitor, capable of reading and fulfilling desires that the mortals themselves might not even recognize. Their touch brings sensations beyond anything possible in the material universe, creating experiences so intense that many visitors lose all desire to ever leave. The demon inhabitants constantly shift their appearances, ensuring that they always represent the absolute pinnacle of whatever their current companion finds most attractive. The architecture within this circle defies conventional understanding, with rooms that expand or contract based on the intimacy desired by their occupants. Private alcoves might suddenly become vast ballrooms if the inhabitants wish to dance, while grand halls can transform into cozy chambers when solitude is preferred. The lighting adjusts automatically to create the perfect ambience, whether that involves the soft glow of candlelight, the harsh illumination of passion, or the mysterious shadows that hide as much as they reveal. The gardens within Slaanesh's realm represent perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the Dark Prince's domain, as they appear to be places of natural beauty while concealing horrors that would drive most mortals insane. These gardens stretch across impossible distances, filled with plants that exist nowhere in the material universe. Trees bear fruit that grants visions of perfect happiness, but consuming it creates an addiction so powerful that victims will do anything to taste it again. Flowers bloom with petals that feel like the softest silk, but secrete toxins that induce hallucinations of ultimate pleasure while slowly dissolving the victim's flesh. The pathways through these gardens are lined with sculptures that appear to be crafted from the most beautiful materials imaginable. Closer inspection reveals that these statues are actually the preserved forms of mortals who became so entranced by the garden's beauty that they lost the will to move, eventually becoming part of the landscape they admired. Their faces remain frozen in expressions of absolute bliss, their eyes still tracking the movements of visitors as they pass by. Streams of liquid that resembles the finest wine flow through the gardens, their banks lined with grass that feels like velvet beneath bare feet. The liquid carries the voices of everyone who has ever experienced perfect contentment, their whispered words of satisfaction, creating a constant murmur that encourages visitors to drink deeply. Those who sample the streams find their perceptions altered, seeing the gardens as even more beautiful than before while becoming increasingly unable to distinguish between pleasure and pain. The amphitheaters of sensation, scattered throughout Slaanesh's domain, serve as venues for performances that push the boundaries of what mortals can experience without losing their sanity entirely. These structures appear as perfect acoustic spaces where every whisper can be heard clearly from any seat, while the loudest screams remain pleasantly modulated to avoid causing physical discomfort. The stages themselves adapt to whatever performance is taking place, transforming from simple platforms into complex environments that immerse both performers and audience in the experience. The performances held in these amphitheaters encompass every form of artistic expression imaginable, but all are twisted to serve Slaanesh's purposes. Musical concerts feature instruments crafted from the bones of extinct species, their sounds creating harmonies that resonate directly with the listener's nervous system. Dance performances involve movements so perfectly choreographed that they induce trance states in observers, while theatrical productions tell stories that rewrite themselves based on the audience's deepest fears and desires. The audiences for these performances consist of a mixture of demons, captured souls, and mortal visitors who have found their way into Slaanesh's realm. Seating arrangements constantly shift to ensure that each observer has the perfect view of whatever aspect of the performance most appeals to them. The amphitheaters themselves seem to feed on the emotional responses of their audiences, growing more elaborate and beautiful as the performances become more intense and disturbing. The ever-changing nature of Slaanesh's realm ensures that no two visits to any location yield identical experiences. The The Dark Prince's domain responds directly to the desires and expectations of those who enter it, reshaping itself to provide exactly what each visitor believes they want, while gradually corrupting those desires toward excess and obsession. A scholar seeking knowledge might find libraries filled with forbidden texts, only to discover that each book read makes them hunger for even more dangerous information. A warrior looking for the perfect battle might encounter opponents who provide exactly the right level of challenge, gradually escalating until the combat becomes an exercise in mutual destruction rather than martial skill. This adaptive quality makes Slaanesh's realm perhaps the most dangerous of all chaos domains for mortals to navigate. While Khorne's realm presents obvious physical dangers, Tzeentch's domain confuses with impossible geometries, and Nurgle's garden disgusts with visible decay, Slaanesh's palace appears to offer everything a visitor could desire. The corruption occurs gradually and subtly, with each granted wish making the next desire slightly more extreme, until the visitor has traveled far beyond any moral boundaries they once recognized. The boundaries between different regions of Slaanesh's domain remain fluid and constantly shifting. A visitor might enter the circle of avidity seeking material wealth, only to find themselves gradually drawn toward the circle of paramour as their desires evolve and intensify. The gardens might suddenly appear in the middle of an amphitheater performance, their impossible beauty becoming part of the show. These transitions occur so smoothly that many visitors never realize they have moved between different areas until they find themselves in situations far removed from their original intentions. The very air within Slaanesh's realm carries a quality that enhances sensation and removes inhibitions. Breathing it creates a gradual sense of euphoria that makes everything seem more intense and desirable than it would appear in the material universe. Colors become more vivid, sounds more beautiful, and physical sensations more acute. This enhancement effect grows stronger the longer someone remains within the domain, creating a feedback loop that makes leaving increasingly difficult as the material universe begins to seem dull and lifeless by comparison. The demon servants of Slaanesh exist within a carefully structured hierarchy that mirrors their patron's obsession with perfection and refinement. At the apex of this infernal aristocracy stand the Keepers of Secrets, greater demons whose very existence embodies the Dark Prince's mastery over forbidden knowledge and impossible sensation. These towering entities represent the ultimate fusion of beauty and horror, their forms shifting between states of divine perfection and nightmarish excess, depending upon the desires and fears of those who gaze upon them. A Keeper of Secrets typically manifests as a creature of impossible grace, standing 4 times the height of a mortal man with limbs that combine the elegance of a dancer with the predatory power of an apex hunter. Their faces blend masculine and feminine features in combinations that transcend mortal understanding of beauty, with eyes that hold depths of knowledge that could drive scholars mad with their implications. Each keeper possesses 4 arms, allowing them to simultaneously wield weapons, cast sorcerous energies, and gesture in ways that hypnotize observers through their fluid perfection. The skin of these greater demons appears as flawless as polished marble, yet shifts between different textures and hues as their emotions change. When pleased, their flesh might take on the appearance of precious metals or rare gems, while anger causes it to darken to the color of dried blood or burnt amber. Their voices carry multiple tones simultaneously, allowing them to speak in harmonies that resonate directly with the listener's nervous system, making their words impossible to ignore or forget. Keepers of Secrets possess an intimate understanding of every mortal weakness and desire, accumulated through millennia of observation and manipulation. They can read the deepest thoughts of any creature they encounter, instantly identifying the precise combination of temptations that would prove most effective against each individual. This knowledge makes them supremely dangerous negotiators and corruptors, as they never waste effort on appeals that would fail to resonate with their targets. Their mastery of forbidden knowledge extends beyond mere psychology into realms of understanding that mortal minds cannot safely comprehend. A Keeper of Secrets might know the true names of stars that died before life began, the mathematical formulas that describe the curvature of space around black holes, or the exact sequence of events that will lead to the heat death of the universe. This knowledge serves as both weapon and reward, as they can offer glimpses of ultimate truth to those willing to pay the price for such revelations. Among the most notorious of these greater demons stands Aeldari, whose name has become synonymous with the corruption of entire worlds through carefully orchestrated campaigns of seduction and excess. This ancient keeper of secrets first gained prominence during the later years of the Great Crusade, when imperial forces encountered the demon while cleansing a world that had fallen to chaos corruption. Aeldari's influence had transformed the planet's population into willing participants in elaborate rituals of self-destruction, with entire cities redesigned to serve as stages for performances that celebrated the abandonment of all moral restraint. The demon's approach to corruption differed markedly from the crude methods employed by servants of the other chaos gods. Where cornate demons relied on direct violence and Nurglite entities spread obvious disease, Aeldari worked through subtle manipulation of existing social structures and cultural values. The demon would identify the most influential members of a society and gradually guide them toward increasingly extreme interpretations of their existing beliefs and practices. On the world of Laodamida, Aeldari corrupted an entire civilization by convincing their greatest artists that true beauty could only be achieved through the incorporation of living subjects into their works. What began as slightly unconventional sculpture techniques gradually evolved into elaborate torture artworks that used sentient beings as both medium and canvas. The planet's museums became galleries of living agony, while its artists competed to devise ever more innovative methods of incorporating screams and suffering into their aesthetic vision. The demon's influence extended beyond individual corruption to encompass entire military campaigns and strategic objectives. During the Horus Heresy, Aeldari played a crucial role in the corruption of several Space Marine chapters, using their pride in their martial achievements as the foundation for more elaborate forms of excess. The demon would appear to chapter masters and captains as the perfect embodiment of military excellence, offering knowledge of tactics and strategies that could guarantee victory in any conflict. These military leaders found themselves drawn into increasingly complex battle plans that prioritized aesthetic perfection over practical effectiveness. Campaigns became elaborate performances designed to demonstrate the commander's artistic vision rather than achieve strategic objectives. Entire companies of Space Marines were sacrificed in battles choreographed to create specific visual effects, their deaths serving as brushstrokes in military masterpieces that existed only in the minds of their corrupted leaders. Zarakinal represents another significant figure among Slaanesh's greater demons, though this keeper of secrets approaches corruption through different methods than Aeldari. Where Aeldari focuses on the gradual subversion of existing structures, Zarakinal specializes in the creation of entirely new forms of excess that push the boundaries of what mortals believe possible. This demon serves as Slaanesh's primary agent for exploring uncharted territories of sensation and experience. Zarakinal's manifestations often involve the establishment of hidden enclaves within otherwise normal societies, secret communities where the demon's followers can explore forms of experience that would be impossible in the wider world. These enclaves serve as laboratories for the development of new methods of corruption, with the demon using its followers as test subjects for increasingly extreme experiments in sensation and consciousness alteration. The demon's influence extends into the realm of technology and science, as Zarakinal delights in corrupting researchers and inventors who seek to push the boundaries of what their species can achieve. Tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus prove particularly susceptible to this form of temptation, as their existing desire to transcend biological limitations aligns perfectly with the demon's goals. Zarakinal guides these corrupted tech adepts toward the creation of devices that blur the line between machine and flesh, producing technologies that enhance sensation beyond anything possible with purely biological or mechanical systems. The demon's laboratories, hidden within the depths of forge worlds and research stations, contain devices that defy imperial understanding of science and engineering. Machines that can translate emotional states directly into physical sensations, neural interfaces that allow multiple consciousnesses to share a single body, and sensory enhancement devices that expand perception into dimensions that mortal minds were never meant to experience. These technologies serve as both tools for corruption and weapons for spreading Slaanesh's influence throughout the galaxy. Zarakinal's approach to military conflict differs significantly from traditional demon tactics, as the entity prefers to corrupt enemy forces rather than destroy them outright. The demon's battles often resemble elaborate seduction scenarios, with each engagement designed to demonstrate the superiority of excess over restraint. Enemy soldiers find themselves facing opponents who fight with impossible grace and beauty, their combat techniques transformed into deadly dances that mesmerize as much as they kill. The demon's forces employ weapons and tactics that prioritize the creation of specific sensory experiences over simple effectiveness. Sonic weapons that produce sounds of such perfect harmony that enemies lower their guard to listen, chemical agents that induce states of euphoria that make resistance seem pointless, and close combat specialists whose fighting styles incorporate elements of performance art that entrance observers while delivering lethal strikes. Beyond the greater demons, Slaanesh's hierarchy includes numerous demon princes who have achieved their exalted status through the pursuit of perfection in their chosen fields of expertise. These ascended mortals represent the ultimate expression of the Dark Prince's philosophy, having pushed their abilities and experiences beyond the limits of mortal possibility to achieve something approaching divine perfection. The path to demonhood under Slaanesh's patronage requires more than simple dedication or martial prowess. Aspiring champions must demonstrate not only mastery of their chosen discipline, but also the ability to transcend the normal boundaries that define that field. A warrior seeking ascension must become more than simply skilled in combat. They must transform warfare itself into an art form that expresses their unique vision of perfect violence. Lucius the Eternal serves as perhaps the most well-known example of a Slaanesh demon prince, though his path to ascension followed a unique trajectory that illustrates the diverse routes available to the Dark Prince's champions. Originally a space marine of the Emperor's Children Legion, Lucius possessed an obsession with swordsmanship that made him one of the finest duelists in the galaxy even before his fall to chaos. The warrior's corruption began not through exposure to obvious temptation, but through his growing frustration with the limitations imposed by imperial doctrine on the pursuit of martial perfection. Lucius believed that true mastery of swordsmanship required the study of techniques and philosophies that the Emperor's rigid codes deemed heretical or dangerous. His gradual embrace of these forbidden arts led him deeper into Slaanesh's web of influence. Following the Horus Heresy, Lucius continued his quest for the perfect duel, seeking out opponents who could provide him with new challenges and opportunities to refine his technique. Each victory taught him something new about the art of combat, while each rare defeat provided insights into weaknesses that needed correction. The Demon Prince's current form reflects this obsession, with his flesh bearing the faces of everyone he has ever killed, their expressions frozen in the moment of their death. The faces embedded in Lucius's skin serve multiple purposes beyond mere decoration. Each visage retains some fragment of its original owner's knowledge and experience, allowing the Demon Prince to access fighting techniques and tactical insights from across the galaxy. Warriors who face Lucius in combat often find themselves confronting not just one opponent, but the accumulated skill of thousands of defeated enemies channeled through a single, perfected form. Lucius's approach to combat exemplifies the Slaaneshi ideal of transforming necessary activities into expressions of artistic vision. His duels become performances as much as battles, with each movement choreographed to demonstrate specific aspects of his martial philosophy. The Demon Prince treats his opponents as collaborators in these performances, guiding them through elaborate exchanges that allow both combatants to display their skills before the inevitable conclusion. Other Demon Princes of Slaanesh have achieved ascension through mastery of different disciplines, each one representing a unique interpretation of what perfection means within their chosen field. Some have transcended the boundaries of artistic expression, creating works that exist simultaneously across multiple dimensions and incorporate elements that mortal minds cannot perceive. Others have pushed the limits of scholarly pursuit, accumulating knowledge that spans the entire history of the galaxy, while developing new methods of learning that bypass the normal limitations of memory and comprehension. The relationship between Slaanesh's champions and their pursuit of impossible perfection creates a unique dynamic within the demon hierarchy. Unlike the servants of other chaos gods, who often compete directly for their patrons' favor, Slaaneshi champions tend to focus on perfecting their individual specializations rather than engaging in crude power struggles. This approach reflects the Dark Prince's appreciation for diversity and innovation, as Slaanesh gains more from having champions who excel in different areas than from promoting simple competition between similar entities. The pursuit of perfection under Slaanesh's guidance inevitably leads champions beyond the normal boundaries of their chosen disciplines. A musician seeking the perfect composition might begin incorporating sounds that exist only in the warp, creating music that affects listeners on levels beyond mere auditory perception. A chef pursuing the ultimate culinary experience might experiment with ingredients drawn from across the galaxy, eventually creating dishes that nourish the soul as much as the body, while fundamentally altering the consumer's perception of reality. This transcendence of normal limitations often results in champions developing abilities that blur the line between their original specialization and outright sorcery. The perfect warrior learns to fight with weapons forged from crystallized emotion, while the ultimate artist creates works that reshape reality around them. These enhanced abilities serve as both rewards for their dedication and tools for spreading Slaanesh's influence throughout the galaxy. The demon legions that serve Slaanesh represent the Dark Prince's appreciation for both beauty and function, with each type of lesser demon designed to fulfill specific roles within the greater hierarchy of excess. These entities embody different aspects of their patron's domain, from the hypnotic allure of forbidden desire to the relentless pursuit of perfect prey. Unlike the crude hordes that serve other chaos gods, Slaanesh's demon hosts operate with a refined coordination that transforms warfare into performance art, each battle choreographed to maximize both tactical effectiveness and aesthetic impact. Daemonets form the backbone of Slaanesh's infernal armies, serving as the primary infantry force in conflicts across both the material universe and the roiling depths of the warp. These entities embody the fundamental duality that defines their patron's nature, appearing simultaneously as objects of irresistible desire and instruments of exquisite destruction. Their forms shift subtly depending on the observer's deepest fantasies, presenting themselves as the perfect embodiment of whatever the viewer finds most attractive while concealing deadly capabilities beneath their seductive exterior. Each daemonet stands roughly human height, though their proportions follow no earthly standard of anatomy. Their limbs possess an inhuman grace that allows them to move with fluid precision, whether gliding across a battlefield or performing the intricate ritual dances that focus their patron's power. Their skin appears flawless from a distance, taking on colors and textures that complement their observer's preferences, yet closer inspection reveals subtle imperfections that hint at their true nature. Scars form decorative patterns across their flesh, while their eyes hold depths that reflect experiences no mortal mind could safely comprehend. The most distinctive feature of these demons lies in their hands, which terminate in razor-sharp claws capable of rending both flesh and spirit with equal ease. These natural weapons appear delicate and elegant, resembling perfectly manicured fingernails extended to impossible lengths, yet they can slice through power armor as easily as silk. The claws secrete a venom that induces intense pleasure even as it destroys nerve tissue, creating wounds that victims often describe as feeling better than any sensation they experienced while whole. Daemonets possess voices that carry multiple harmonic frequencies simultaneously, allowing them to speak in choruses even when alone. Their words bypass rational thought to appeal directly to the listener's emotional centers, making their suggestions seem like the observer's own ideas rather than external influence. This ability makes them supremely effective at sowing discord within enemy ranks, as they can convince soldiers to abandon their posts, officers to countermand their own orders, and entire units to turn their weapons on former allies. The battlefield presence of demonettes transforms combat into something resembling a deadly ballet, with each demon moving in perfect coordination with its sisters to create patterns that mesmerize observers while delivering lethal strikes. Their attacks focus on precision rather than brute force, targeting nerve clusters and vital organs with surgical accuracy that maximizes both damage and the sensation experienced by their victims. Enemy soldiers often find themselves unable to properly defend against these attacks, not due to superior demon speed or strength, but because the hypnotic quality of their movements makes it difficult to track their actual positions. Groups of demonettes employ coordinated tactics that emphasize their collective hypnotic abilities, surrounding enemy formations in complex geometric patterns that create visual effects designed to disorient and confuse. Their movements generate subsonic frequencies that interfere with human balance and coordination, while the synchronized swaying of their forms creates optical illusions that make accurate targeting nearly impossible. These formations can maintain their effectiveness even when individual demons are destroyed, as the surviving members automatically adjust their positions to preserve the overall pattern. The psychological impact of facing demonettes in battle often proves more devastating than their physical attacks. Imperial Guard units have been known to break and flee not from fear, but from an overwhelming desire to join the demon host, their soldiers abandoning their weapons to pursue the retreating entities into obvious traps. Space Marines, protected by their conditioning and power armor, still find their concentration disrupted by the constant sensory assault of the demon's presence, their normally precise combat techniques becoming sloppy and unfocused. Demonettes serve roles beyond simple combat, functioning as recruiters and corruptors who infiltrate mortal societies to identify potential servants for their patron. They appear in dreams and visions to those whose desires align with Slaanesh's interests, gradually guiding their targets toward increasingly extreme pursuits. A struggling artist might receive nocturnal visits from a demonette who offers inspiration for revolutionary new techniques, while an ambitious politician could find their sleep filled with visions of perfect governance that require only small moral compromises to achieve. These corruption campaigns often span decades or even centuries, with individual demonettes maintaining contact with specific targets across their entire mortal lifespans. The demons demonstrate remarkable patience in these endeavors, understanding that the most complete corruption occurs gradually and voluntarily. They never force their targets to accept their gifts, instead presenting opportunities and suggestions that allow mortals to believe they are making independent choices, even as they follow paths carefully laid out by their supernatural guides. Fiends of Slaanesh represent the Dark Prince's appreciation for the hunt and the thrill of pursuit, serving as the shock cavalry and rapid response forces within demon armies. These creatures embody predatory grace taken to impossible extremes, combining the speed of the galaxy's fastest hunters with sensory capabilities that allow them to track prey across multiple dimensions of reality. Their alien anatomy defies easy categorization, as they possess characteristics drawn from dozens of different predatory species, while maintaining an overall form that somehow achieves perfect aesthetic balance. A typical fiend stands roughly twice human height at the shoulder, supported by 6 powerful limbs that can function as either legs for running or arms for combat, depending on the creature's immediate needs. Their bodies combine the sleek musculature of great cats with the sinuous flexibility of serpents, allowing them to move across any terrain with equal ease. Their heads feature multiple sets of sensory organs, including conventional eyes that can perceive across the entire electromagnetic spectrum, specialized organs that detect psychic emanations, and chemical receptors sensitive enough to track individual scents across light years of distance. The most distinctive feature of these demons lies in the intoxicating musk they constantly emit, a complex chemical cocktail that affects the nervous systems of most sentient species. This scent triggers responses that vary depending on the target's psychology and physiology, but generally induces a combination of euphoria, disorientation, and an overwhelming desire to approach the source. The musk's effects intensify with proximity and exposure time, eventually creating a state of complete mental submission in those who inhale too much of it. Fiends employ their supernatural speed to devastating effect in combat, moving so quickly that they appear as blurs even to enhanced human perception. Their attacks consist of lightning-fast strikes delivered by razor-sharp claws while passing their targets at full speed, inflicting precise wounds before vanishing again into motion too rapid to follow. This hit-and-run approach allows them to systematically dismantle enemy formations without ever presenting static targets for return fire. The creature's hunting instincts drive them to pursue fleeing enemies with relentless determination, as they derive as much satisfaction from the chase as from the eventual kill. Fiends can track their prey across vast distances and through multiple dimensions, following psychic scent trails that remain detectable long after physical evidence has disappeared. Imperial forces have reported cases of individual fiends pursuing specific targets for months or even years, appearing unexpectedly in locations thousands of light years from their last sighting. Their supernatural tracking abilities extend beyond simple pursuit to encompass a form of precognitive hunting that allows them to anticipate their prey's movements and reactions. A fiend stalking a particular target often arrives at the victim's destination before they do, having somehow predicted the route they would take and the decisions they would make along the way. This prescient capability makes escape from a determined fiend nearly impossible, as conventional evasion tactics fail against an opponent who already knows what the fleeing target will attempt. Fiends demonstrate remarkable intelligence in their hunting strategies, often working in coordinated packs that drive prey toward predetermined killing zones or force them into situations where escape becomes impossible. They understand the psychology of fear and desperation, using their presence to manipulate their target's decision-making processes. A pack might allow a fleeing enemy to glimpse apparent escape routes while subtly herding them toward areas where other pack members wait in ambush. The creature's role extends beyond simple combat to encompass intelligence gathering and reconnaissance for larger demon forces. Their enhanced senses allow them to detect hidden enemies, identify weak points in defensive positions, and locate valuable targets for corruption or capture. Fiends can move through enemy territory undetected when they choose, using their speed and agility to avoid patrols while gathering information about troop movements, supply lines, and command structures. Seekers of Slaanesh represent the Dark Prince's mounted cavalry, demon riders paired with equally supernatural steeds in combinations that achieve perfect harmony between mount and rider. These entities embody the concept of pursuit taken to its ultimate expression, serving as fast-moving strike forces capable of covering vast distances in impossibly short periods. The relationship between seeker and steed transcends normal concepts of rider and mount, as the two entities function as a single organism dedicated to the perfect execution of high-speed warfare. The seeker themselves appear as refined versions of demonettes, their forms adapted for mounted combat through subtle changes in proportion and anatomy. Their legs possess enhanced flexibility that allows them to maintain perfect balance regardless of their mount's movements, while their arms develop additional joints that enable them to wield weapons effectively from any angle. Their senses become attuned to their steed's perceptions, creating a shared awareness that allows the partnership to react to threats and opportunities with superhuman coordination. Steeds of Slaanesh combine the physical characteristics of multiple terrestrial creatures while maintaining an overall appearance that achieves impossible aesthetic perfection. Their bodies suggest great cats stretched to inhuman proportions, with elongated limbs that end in claws capable of finding purchase on any surface. Their heads feature predatory features softened by an alien beauty that makes them appear almost benevolent despite their obvious lethality. Multiple tongues extend from their mouths, each one capable of independent movement and equipped with chemical receptors that supplement their already formidable sensory capabilities. The bond between seeker and steed develops over centuries of shared experience, with each partnership becoming increasingly synchronized, until they achieve a level of coordination that borders on telepathic communication. This connection allows them to execute complex maneuvers that would be impossible for conventional cavalry, as the steed can anticipate its rider's intentions, while the seeker instinctively adjusts to their mount's movements and reactions. Seekers excel at hit and run tactics that exploit their superior mobility to strike enemy weak points before withdrawing beyond the range of effective retaliation. Their attacks focus on disrupting enemy formations and eliminating key personnel, using their speed to bypass defensive lines and strike directly at command elements, heavy weapons teams, and communication nodes. A single unit of Seekers can paralyze an entire enemy army by systematically eliminating the officers and specialists who coordinate large-scale operations. The psychological impact of Seeker attacks often exceeds their direct military effectiveness, as the sight of these graceful predators flowing across the battlefield like a deadly tide can shatter enemy morale even before contact is made. Their approach generates a subsonic humming that interferes with human concentration and coordination, while the hypnotic quality of their synchronized movements makes accurate targeting extremely difficult. Enemy soldiers often report feeling mesmerized by the approaching cavalry, unable to properly aim their weapons or coordinate defensive measures. Seeker chariots represent the Dark Prince's appreciation for combining practical warfare with elaborate spectacle, serving as mobile platforms that deliver both devastating firepower and psychological warfare effects. These vehicles transcend normal concepts of military equipment, functioning simultaneously as weapons of war and works of art that express their crew's dedication to achieving perfect beauty through violence. Each chariot represents a unique creation tailored to its occupant's specific vision of aesthetic perfection. The chariots themselves appear to be constructed from materials that shift between different substances depending on viewing angle and lighting conditions. What appears to be polished metal from one perspective might seem like crystallized music from another, while certain angles reveal construction materials that exist only in the deepest reaches of the warp. The vehicle's frames incorporate flowing curves and organic shapes that suggest living creatures as much as mechanical constructs, with decorative elements that pulse and shift in response to their crew's emotional states. Each chariot carries a crew of specialized daemons who have dedicated themselves to mastering the arts of mobile warfare. The driver maintains perfect control over the vehicle's supernatural steeds while simultaneously coordinating with other crew members to execute complex tactical maneuvers. Weapon operators handle the chariot's armaments with the same precision and artistry that their ground-based sisters bring to close combat, treating each shot as a brushstroke in a larger masterpiece of destruction. The vehicle's weapon systems reflect Slaanesh's preference for precision over raw destructive power, featuring armaments designed to inflict specific types of damage that maximize both tactical effectiveness and aesthetic impact. Sonic weapons produce harmonious tones that can shatter armor while inducing euphoric states in nearby enemies, causing them to lower their guard or abandon their positions in pursuit of the source of the beautiful sounds. Alchemical projectors spray clouds of exotic chemicals that enhance sensation while disrupting nervous system function, creating areas where enemy troops become hypersensitive to pain and pleasure alike. Hellflayer chariots represent a more specialized variant designed specifically for close combat and the ritual harvesting of enemy essence. These vehicles sacrifice some of the mobility and ranged firepower of standard chariots in favor of enhanced melee capabilities and specialized equipment for capturing and processing living enemies. The Hellflayer's most distinctive feature consists of massive rotating blades mounted on the vehicle's front and sides, creating a whirling barrier of razor-sharp metal that can slice through entire enemy formations. The blades themselves appear to be forged from crystallized screams, their surfaces reflecting not light but the emotional states of those who observe them. They rotate at speeds that create complex harmonic frequencies, generating sounds that bypass conscious hearing to affect listeners directly at the neurological level. Enemy troops caught within the blade radius experience not just physical dismemberment, but a form of spiritual dissolution that feeds directly into the chariot's supernatural power systems. Hellflayer crews specialize in the art of ritual combat, treating each engagement as a ceremony dedicated to their patron's glory. Their attacks follow carefully choreographed patterns that maximize both the visual spectacle of their assault and the spiritual significance of their victim's destruction. The crew members coordinate their movements to create complex geometric patterns with their weapons and positioning, transforming the battlefield into a stage for elaborate performances that celebrate the beauty of perfectly executed violence. The vehicle's harvesting systems collect more than simple physical trophies from their victims, as specialized apparatus built into the chariot's frame captures and processes the psychic emanations released during moments of extreme sensation. This equipment converts raw emotional energy into a refined essence that can be stored for later use or transmitted directly to Slaanesh's realm as an offering. The most successful Hellflayer crews develop reputations for the quality and intensity of the essence they harvest, with their offerings becoming prized additions to their patrons' collection of perfect experiences. Both Seeker chariots and Hellflayers serve roles beyond simple combat, functioning as mobile temples and recruitment centers that spread Slaanesh's influence wherever they travel. Their crews perform elaborate rituals at the sites of their victories, using the psychic resonance of recent violence to create temporary gateways that allow lesser demons to manifest in the material universe. These ceremonies often attract mortal observers who become entranced by the combination of artistic beauty and spiritual power on display, leading them to seek out ways to join or serve the demon host. The chariot's presence on a battlefield transforms the nature of the conflict itself, as their crews work to elevate simple warfare into something approaching high art. They coordinate their attacks with other demon units to create visual and auditory effects that transcend normal military objectives, turning each engagement into a performance that serves multiple purposes simultaneously. Enemy forces find themselves fighting not just for tactical objectives, but for their very souls, as the demon chariots work to corrupt and convert as many opponents as possible, rather than simply destroying them outright. The corruption of mortal souls represents perhaps Slaanesh's greatest achievement, as the Dark Prince has perfected methods of subversion that transform ordinary humans into willing servants without the crude coercion employed by the other Chaos gods. Unlike Khorne's brutal recruitment through violence or Nurgle's spread of obvious disease, Slaanesh's cults emerge from the natural desires and ambitions that exist within every sentient being. The process begins not with dramatic supernatural intervention, but with subtle encouragement of existing human tendencies toward excellence, beauty, and self-improvement. Imperial society, with its rigid hierarchies and emphasis on duty above personal fulfillment, creates ideal conditions for Slaaneshi corruption to take root. Citizens who spend their entire lives following predetermined roles often develop deep-seated longings for experiences that transcend their mundane existence. A factory worker might dream of creating something beautiful rather than merely functional, while a minor administrator could harbor fantasies of wielding real authority instead of shuffling documents. These suppressed desires provide entry points that Slaaneshi cultists exploit with remarkable patience and skill. The formation of Slaaneshi cults typically begins with the identification of individuals whose personalities contain the seeds of obsession or perfectionism. Cultists operating within imperial society learn to recognize the subtle signs that indicate potential recruits: the artist who spends excessive time perfecting minor details, the soldier who practices weapon drills long after others have retired, the scholar who pursues knowledge with an intensity that concerns their colleagues. These individuals possess the psychological framework necessary for the kind of dedication that Slaanesh demands from followers. Initial contact occurs through seemingly innocent social interactions that gradually introduce potential recruits to new perspectives on their existing interests. A cultist posing as an art dealer might approach a struggling painter with offers to display their work in exclusive galleries, while someone infiltrating military circles could suggest advanced training techniques that promise to elevate a soldier's combat skills beyond normal human limitations. These approaches avoid any obvious supernatural elements, instead focusing on practical benefits that align with the target's existing goals and ambitions. The recruitment process unfolds across months or years, with cultists carefully monitoring their targets' responses to increasingly subtle tests and challenges. A potential recruit might receive invitations to exclusive social gatherings where conversations gradually shift toward topics of personal fulfillment and the pursuit of excellence. These events appear to be normal networking opportunities or cultural salons, but they serve to identify individuals whose dedication to their crafts exceeds healthy boundaries and ventures into obsessive territory. Cultists employ sophisticated psychological techniques to gradually reshape their targets' value systems and moral boundaries. They introduce concepts of relative morality that suggest conventional ethical constraints limit human potential, while presenting examples of historical figures who achieved greatness by transcending social norms. These philosophical discussions occur in contexts that seem academic or artistic rather than religious, allowing potential recruits to adopt dangerous ideas without recognizing their source or implications. The transition from interested participant to committed cultist occurs when individuals begin to prioritize their pursuit of perfection above all other considerations, including family relationships, professional obligations, and personal safety. This shift often manifests as increased isolation from former social circles, as the recruit finds conversations with non-cultists increasingly frustrating and meaningless. They begin to view ordinary people as limited creatures, incapable of understanding the higher purposes that now drive their existence. Established cults maintain elaborate hierarchical structures that mirror legitimate imperial organizations while serving entirely different purposes. Lower-ranking members continue to perform their normal societal roles, using their positions to identify and cultivate new recruits while gathering resources for cult activities. These individuals often remain unaware of their organization's true nature, believing themselves to be part of exclusive clubs dedicated to artistic appreciation or philosophical discourse. Mid-level cultists receive greater insight into their organization's goals and methods, learning to perform minor rituals that enhance their abilities within their chosen specializations. A cultist musician might discover techniques for composing melodies that induce specific emotional states in listeners, while a cultist administrator could learn methods for manipulating bureaucratic processes with supernatural efficiency. These enhanced capabilities serve both to reward loyalty and to demonstrate the tangible benefits of continued service. The inner circles of Slaaneshi cults consist of individuals who have fully embraced their patron's philosophy and dedicated their lives to spreading corruption throughout imperial society. These senior cultists possess genuine psychic abilities granted by their devotion, allowing them to influence others' thoughts and emotions directly rather than relying solely on conventional persuasion. They coordinate cult activities across multiple worlds and sectors, maintaining communication networks that span vast distances through methods that imperial authorities struggle to detect or intercept. High-ranking cultists often occupy positions of significant authority within imperial institutions, using their influence to subtly reshape policies and procedures in ways that create opportunities for further corruption. A cult leader serving as a planetary governor might establish new cultural programs that celebrate artistic expression, while gradually introducing themes that normalize excess and moral flexibility. Military commanders under Slaanesh's influence could implement training regimens that emphasize personal glory over collective discipline, weakening unit cohesion while fostering the kind of individual ambition that the Dark Prince finds useful. The methods employed by Slaaneshi cults to corrupt new members vary significantly depending on the target's profession, social status, and psychological profile. Artists represent particularly valuable recruits due to their existing focus on creative expression and their potential influence over cultural trends. Cultists approach struggling artists with offers of patronage and exhibition opportunities, gradually introducing them to increasingly extreme aesthetic philosophies that celebrate transgression and boundary breaking as essential elements of true art. These artistic corruption campaigns often begin with subtle suggestions that conventional moral constraints limit creative potential. A cult patron might commission works that explore themes of forbidden desire or challenge social taboos, presenting these requests as opportunities for the artist to demonstrate their courage and vision. As the artist becomes comfortable with these transgressive themes, the commissions become progressively more extreme, leading them toward the creation of works that incorporate actual suffering and degradation as aesthetic elements. The corruption of artists proves particularly effective because their work serves as a vector for spreading Slaaneshi influence throughout society. Paintings, sculptures, musical compositions, and literary works created by corrupted artists carry subtle psychic resonances that affect viewers and audiences in ways they cannot consciously detect. A portrait painted by a Slaaneshi cultist might inspire feelings of dissatisfaction with conventional morality in those who observe it, while a musical performance could plant seeds of ambition and desire for transcendence that grow stronger over time. Musicians under Slaaneshes influence develop techniques for composing pieces that bypass rational thought to affect listeners directly at the neurological level. These compositions incorporate mathematical relationships and harmonic structures that resonate with the human nervous system in ways that conventional music theory cannot explain. Audiences exposed to these works often report profound emotional experiences that leave them craving similar sensations, leading them to seek out the composer and potentially become involved with the cult that sponsors their work. Performers represent another category of artist that proves particularly susceptible to Slaaneshi corruption, as their craft already involves the deliberate manipulation of audience emotions and the cultivation of personal charisma. Actors, dancers, and other entertainers possess natural abilities that align closely with the skills required for cult recruitment and indoctrination. Cultists approach these individuals with offers of roles in exclusive productions that promise to showcase their talents to influential audiences. These performances gradually evolve from conventional entertainment into elaborate rituals that serve multiple purposes simultaneously. They provide cover for cult meetings and recruitment activities while generating the emotional energy that feeds Slaanesh's power. Audiences attend believing they are witnessing cutting-edge artistic expression, unaware that they are participating in ceremonies designed to gradually alter their psychological and spiritual states. The corruption of imperial nobility presents unique challenges and opportunities for Slaaneshi cults, as these individuals possess significant resources and influence while living lives already characterized by luxury and privilege. Cultists must identify aspects of noble existence that remain unfulfilled despite material abundance, focusing on psychological needs for recognition, legacy, and transcendence that wealth alone cannot satisfy. Noble houses provide ideal environments for Slaaneshi corruption due to their emphasis on refinement, cultural sophistication, and the pursuit of excellence in various fields. These families often maintain private collections of art and artifacts, sponsor cultural events, and compete with rival houses to demonstrate their superior taste and discernment. Cultists infiltrate these circles by presenting themselves as experts in rare artistic movements or exclusive philosophical schools that promise to elevate their patrons above their social competitors. The corruption process within noble houses often begins with the introduction of exotic entertainment and cultural practices drawn from distant worlds or ancient traditions. These activities appear to be harmless diversions that demonstrate the family's cosmopolitan sophistication, but they gradually introduce concepts and experiences that normal imperial society would consider transgressive or dangerous. Private salons featuring unusual musical performances, exclusive dining experiences with rare delicacies, and intimate gatherings focused on philosophical discourse all serve as vehicles for gradual indoctrination. Nobles prove particularly susceptible to corruption through appeals to their desire for historical significance and lasting legacy. Cultists present opportunities for patronage of revolutionary artistic movements or support for philosophical schools that promise to reshape imperial culture for generations to come. These projects appear to offer paths to immortality through cultural influence, appealing to nobles who fear being forgotten after their deaths despite their current wealth and status. The resources available to corrupted noble houses allow Slaaneshi cults to operate on scales impossible for organizations dependent on lower-class membership. Noble patrons can fund elaborate facilities for cult activities, sponsor the creation of corrupted artworks on massive scales, and use their political connections to protect cult operations from imperial investigation. A single corrupted noble house can serve as the foundation for cult networks that span entire sectors, their wealth and influence providing cover for activities that would otherwise attract unwanted attention. Professional soldiers and members of the Imperial Guard present different challenges for Slaaneshi recruitment, as their training and indoctrination emphasize duty, discipline, and collective action over individual achievement. However, the constant exposure to violence and death that characterizes military service creates psychological vulnerabilities that skilled cultists can exploit. Soldiers who have witnessed the horrors of warfare often develop deep-seated needs for experiences that help them feel alive and human again after prolonged exposure to mechanized killing. Cultists targeting military personnel focus on the pursuit of martial perfection and the desire for recognition of individual skill within collective organizations. They approach promising soldiers with offers of advanced training in exotic fighting techniques or access to superior equipment that could enhance their combat effectiveness. These opportunities appear to be legitimate methods for professional advancement, but they gradually introduce concepts that prioritize personal glory over unit cohesion and mission success. The corruption of military personnel proves particularly dangerous because these individuals possess combat training, access to weapons, and knowledge of imperial defensive systems. A single corrupted officer can compromise entire military operations by providing intelligence to cult allies or sabotaging critical missions at crucial moments. Corrupted soldiers within guard regiments can spread Slaaneshi influence throughout their units, using their shared experiences of combat and hardship to build bonds of trust that facilitate recruitment efforts. Military corruption often manifests through the development of warrior cults that celebrate individual prowess and the aesthetic aspects of combat. These organizations appear to be legitimate martial societies focused on preserving fighting traditions and honoring military heritage, but they gradually evolve into groups that treat warfare as an art form rather than a necessary duty. Members begin to prioritize the beauty and elegance of their combat techniques over practical effectiveness, leading to tactical decisions that serve aesthetic rather than strategic purposes. The temptations employed by Slaaneshi cults extend far beyond simple offers of pleasure or material reward, encompassing sophisticated appeals to fundamental human desires for meaning, recognition, and transcendence. Pride represents one of the most effective tools for corruption, as cultists identify individuals whose accomplishments exceed those of their peers and gradually convince them that conventional society fails to properly appreciate their superior abilities and contributions. This approach proves particularly effective with scholars, tech adepts, and other intellectual professionals who have dedicated their lives to the pursuit of knowledge or technical expertise. Cultists approach these individuals with recognition of their achievements and suggestions that their talents deserve broader acknowledgement and application. They present opportunities for the scholar to share their knowledge with exclusive audiences who can truly appreciate its significance, gradually leading them toward research projects that transcend normal ethical boundaries. The pursuit of perfection serves as another primary vector for Slaaneshi corruption, as cultists identify individuals whose dedication to excellence in their chosen fields approaches obsessive levels. These targets often possess genuine talent and ability, but they remain unsatisfied with their current achievements and constantly seek ways to improve their performance. Cultists offer techniques, resources, and opportunities that promise to elevate their skills beyond normal human limitations, gradually leading them toward practices that require increasingly extreme sacrifices and moral compromises. Hedonistic corruption represents the most obvious, but often least effective approach employed by Slaaneshi cults, as direct appeals to base desires typically attract individuals who lack the dedication and intelligence required for long-term service. However, sophisticated hedonistic corruption can prove highly effective when applied to individuals whose lives lack meaningful pleasure or satisfaction. Cultists identify people trapped in monotonous existences and gradually introduce them to experiences that provide genuine fulfillment and joy, creating psychological dependencies that can be exploited for recruitment purposes. The most successful Slaaneshi cults combine multiple corruption vectors simultaneously, presenting potential recruits with opportunities that address their intellectual, emotional, and physical needs within integrated programs that appear to offer comprehensive personal development. These organizations function as exclusive clubs or professional societies that provide networking opportunities, skill development, cultural enrichment, and social interaction within single, carefully managed environments where every aspect of the member's experience can be monitored and guided toward desired outcomes. The Third Legion stood as perhaps the most tragic example of how the pursuit of perfection could transform noble warriors into instruments of absolute corruption. Originally known as the Emperor's Children, they had earned their exalted name through achievements that surpassed even the legendary accomplishments of their brother legions. During the early years of the Great Crusade, when the Emperor still walked among his warriors, the Third Legion demonstrated such exemplary conduct and martial excellence that they became the first and only legion granted the honor of bearing the imperial aquila upon their armor and banners. This distinction carried profound significance within the hierarchy of the legion's Astartes, as it represented the Emperor's personal recognition of their worthiness to serve as living embodiments of his vision for humanity's future. The warriors of the Third Legion wore this honor with fierce pride, dedicating themselves to maintaining standards of conduct and combat effectiveness that would justify their patrons' trust. Every battle became an opportunity to demonstrate their superiority, every campaign a chance to prove that the Emperor's faith in them remained well placed. Fulgrim's discovery on the world of Chemos brought new purpose and direction to his legion's existing obsession with excellence. The Primarch had spent his early years transforming a dying industrial world into a paradise of artistic and cultural achievement, accomplishing through vision and determination what others might have considered impossible. When he assumed command of the Third Legion, Fulgrim brought with him philosophies of improvement and refinement that resonated perfectly with his warriors' existing dedication to perfection. Under their Primarch's guidance, the Emperor's children developed doctrines that treated warfare as the highest form of art, with each engagement planned and executed according to aesthetic principles as much as tactical considerations. Their battle formations moved with choreographed precision, their weapon strikes followed patterns that maximized both effectiveness and visual impact, and their victories achieved a level of elegance that other legions could only admire from a distance. The Third Legion's campaigns became legendary not just for their strategic success, but for the manner in which that success was achieved. The Legion's culture emphasized individual excellence within collective perfection, encouraging each battle brother to master multiple disciplines while maintaining perfect coordination with his squad mates. Warriors competed to achieve the most precise marksmanship, the most elegant swordsmanship, and the most flawless execution of complex tactical maneuvers. This internal competition drove constant improvement throughout the Legion's ranks, creating a feedback loop of escalating achievement that pushed every member toward ever greater heights of capability. Their armor and equipment reflected this obsession with perfection, featuring decorative elements and customizations that transformed functional military gear into works of art. Each warrior's power armor bore unique embellishments that celebrated his personal achievements and specializations, while weapons received modifications that enhanced both their performance and their aesthetic appeal. The Legion's artificers became renowned throughout the Imperium for their ability to create equipment that combined supreme functionality with breathtaking beauty. The Emperor's Children's approach to recruitment and training set them apart from other legions, as they selected aspirants not just for physical capability and psychological resilience, but for their potential to achieve true excellence in their chosen specializations. The Legion maintained smaller numbers than many of their brother legions, preferring to focus their resources on creating warriors of exceptional quality rather than pursuing simple numerical strength. Each new battle brother underwent training regimens that lasted longer and demanded higher standards than those employed by other legions. Their homeworld of Chemos became a center of cultural and artistic achievement that rivaled even Terra in its sophistication and beauty. The planet cities featured architecture that combined practical functionality with stunning visual design, while its academies and workshops produced artists, musicians, and craftsmen whose works were sought after throughout the Imperium. The integration of military and civilian excellence created a society where the pursuit of perfection permeated every aspect of existence. The first signs of the Legion's eventual corruption appeared during their campaign against the Lair, an alien species whose civilization had achieved remarkable technological and cultural sophistication before falling to the influence of chaos. The Lair had developed biotechnology that allowed them to reshape their own bodies according to aesthetic ideals, creating forms that combined multiple species' characteristics in pursuit of perfect beauty and functionality. Their cities incorporated living architecture that responded to the inhabitants' needs and desires, while their weapons and equipment achieved levels of artistry that impressed even the perfection-obsessed Emperor's children. Fulgrim's discovery of the Lair blade marked the beginning of his legion's downfall, though the corruption occurred so gradually that neither the Primarch nor his warriors recognized the danger until it was far too late. The weapon appeared to be the ultimate expression of the alien species' mastery over form and function, featuring a blade that maintained perfect sharpness while displaying visual characteristics that shifted and changed according to the wielder's emotional state. The sword's grip seemed designed specifically for Fulgrim's hand, as if the alien smiths had somehow anticipated his eventual discovery of their creation. The blade's influence began subtly, enhancing Fulgrim's already formidable combat abilities, while gradually altering his perceptions of what constituted acceptable behavior in pursuit of perfection. The Primarch found himself taking greater risks in battle, not from recklessness, but from a growing confidence that his enhanced capabilities made previous limitations irrelevant. His dueling style became more elaborate and theatrical, incorporating movements that served aesthetic rather than purely tactical purposes. These changes in their Primarch's behavior influenced the entire Legion, as the Emperor's children had always looked to Fulgrim as the ultimate example of what they aspired to become. Warriors began to adopt similar approaches to combat, treating their battles as performances that required not just victory, but victory achieved in the most impressive manner possible. The Legion's tactical doctrines evolved to incorporate increasingly complex maneuvers that prioritized elegance and style over simple effectiveness. The corruption spread through the Legion's command structure, as senior officers found themselves drawn to philosophies that justified the abandonment of conventional moral constraints in pursuit of military and artistic excellence. Captains and chapter masters began to view imperial regulations and codes of conduct as limitations imposed by lesser minds who could not appreciate the higher purposes that drove truly exceptional warriors. This intellectual corruption proved more dangerous than any direct supernatural influence, as it convinced the Legion's leadership that their growing extremism represented enlightenment rather than damnation. The Emperor's children's participation in the Horus Heresy began not from loyalty to the War Master, but from their conviction that the Imperium's existing structure prevented them from achieving their full potential. They viewed Horus's rebellion as an opportunity to create a new order that would properly recognize and reward true excellence, rather than constraining it within bureaucratic limitations and political considerations. The Legion's officers convinced themselves that they were fighting for a more perfect version of the Emperor's vision, one that would allow humanity's greatest achievements to flourish without artificial restrictions. Their early battles during the heresy demonstrated the tactical brilliance that had made the Third Legion legendary, but observers noted disturbing changes in their conduct and priorities. The Emperor's children began to prolong engagements unnecessarily, seeking to create more elaborate and impressive victories rather than achieving their objectives through efficient means. They showed increasing interest in capturing rather than killing enemy commanders, particularly those whose skills or knowledge might contribute to their own pursuit of perfection. The Legion's transformation accelerated dramatically following their exposure to the corrupted influences they encountered while fighting alongside other traitor forces. The Emperor's children discovered that their pursuit of perfection could be enhanced through methods that their previous imperial conditioning had prevented them from considering. They began to experiment with techniques for pushing their bodies and minds beyond normal Space Marine limitations, using knowledge gained from defeated enemies and alien artifacts to transcend the boundaries that had previously constrained their development. Fulgrim's gradual transformation into a demon primarch occurred over months of increasing corruption, as the entity bound within the lair blade slowly merged with his consciousness and reshaped his physical form. The Primarch's appearance began to incorporate inhuman characteristics that he initially dismissed as natural evolution toward a more perfect state. His skin took on an otherworldly luminescence, his movements gained a hypnotic quality that made observers struggle to look away, and his voice acquired harmonic overtones that bypassed rational thought to affect listeners directly at the emotional level. The Primarch's changing nature influenced his legion in ways that went beyond simple emulation of his behavior. The psychic emanations of his transformation created a field of corruption that gradually altered the Emperor's children at the genetic and spiritual levels. Warriors found their enhanced senses becoming even more acute, their reflexes reaching supernatural levels of precision, and their understanding of combat expanding to encompass dimensions of warfare that normal Space Marines could not perceive. These enhancements came with corresponding changes in personality and priorities that the Legion's warriors initially welcomed as signs of their continued evolution toward perfection. They developed an increased appreciation for the aesthetic aspects of violence, finding beauty in the precise application of force and the elegant choreography of well-executed combat maneuvers. The sight of blood became pleasing rather than merely functional, while the sounds of battle acquired musical qualities that enhanced their enjoyment of warfare. The Emperor's children's assault on Terra during the final phase of the Horus Heresy represented the culmination of their transformation from noble warriors into instruments of corruption. Their approach to the siege differed markedly from the brutal frontal assaults favored by other traitor legions, as they sought to infiltrate and corrupt the Imperial Palace's defenders rather than simply overwhelming them through superior force. The Third Legion's warriors moved through the palace's corridors like deadly artists, treating each engagement as an opportunity to demonstrate their evolved understanding of warfare. Their tactics during the siege focused on psychological warfare and the corruption of enemy morale, using their enhanced abilities to sow discord and despair among the Imperial defenders. Emperor's children squads would appear suddenly in secure areas of the palace, having infiltrated through routes that conventional forces could never have discovered or navigated. Their attacks targeted key personnel and strategic locations, but they also worked to capture and corrupt enemy officers who might serve as vectors for spreading their influence throughout the Loyalist forces. The Legion's presence within the Imperial Palace created zones of corruption that gradually expanded as their influence affected the surrounding environment. Areas where Emperor's children forces had operated for extended periods began to exhibit subtle changes in architecture and atmosphere, with decorative elements becoming more elaborate and surfaces taking on qualities that appealed to enhanced senses while disturbing normal human perception. These environmental changes served both tactical and spiritual purposes, creating terrain that favored the traitor forces while weakening the resolve of Imperial defenders. Following the heresy's conclusion and their retreat into the Eye of Terror, the Emperor's children continued their transformation in ways that would have horrified their former selves. Free from any remaining imperial constraints, they pursued perfection through methods that incorporated the full spectrum of sensation and experience available within the warp's chaotic realm. The Legion fragmented into smaller warbands, each one dedicated to exploring different aspects of their patron's domain, while maintaining the competitive spirit that had always characterized their culture. Some warbands focused on the perfection of combat techniques, developing fighting styles that incorporated supernatural elements drawn from their experiences within the Eye of Terror. These warriors treated every battle as a performance art that required not just victory, but victory achieved through methods that demonstrated their mastery over conventional limitations. Their weapons and armor underwent continuous modification and enhancement, incorporating materials and technologies that existed only within the warp's reality-defying environment. Other groups within the Scattered Legion dedicated themselves to artistic pursuits that pushed the boundaries of what could be achieved through creative expression. They established workshops and studios within demon worlds where they could experiment with techniques and materials that would be impossible to obtain or utilize in the material universe. Their creations served multiple purposes, functioning simultaneously as works of art, ritual implements, and weapons that could affect both physical and spiritual targets. The destruction of Chemos represented one of the most shocking acts committed by the Fallen Legion, as they systematically destroyed the world that had shaped their Primarch and provided the cultural foundation for their original pursuit of excellence. The Emperor's children viewed this act not as vandalism or spite, but as a necessary step in their evolution beyond the limitations that their past had imposed upon them. They treated the planet's destruction as the ultimate artistic statement, a masterpiece of annihilation that demonstrated their complete transcendence of conventional morality and attachment. The process of destroying their homeworld extended over several years, as different warbands competed to devise the most creative and aesthetically pleasing methods of obliteration. Some groups focused on the systematic dismantling of the planet's cities, treating each building's destruction as a separate artistic project that required careful planning and execution. Others worked to corrupt the population through exposure to experiences that pushed them beyond the boundaries of sanity and survival, using the inhabitants' suffering as raw material for elaborate performances. The Legion's current activities span the galaxy as scattered warbands pursue their individual interpretations of perfection while maintaining loose connections to their former brothers. Some groups focus on raiding Imperial worlds to gather resources and subjects for their experiments, while others work to infiltrate and corrupt specific institutions or organizations that might serve their long-term goals. The competitive nature that once drove them to excel as loyal Space Marines now motivates them to outdo each other in the extremity and creativity of their corrupted achievements. Their relationship with other Chaos forces remains complex and often strained, as the Emperor's children's obsession with perfection makes them difficult allies for groups that prioritize different aspects of Chaos worship. They view most other traitor forces as crude and limited in their understanding of what true excellence requires, while other factions often find the Emperor's children's methods unnecessarily elaborate and time-consuming. Despite these tensions, the Fallen Legion's expertise in corruption and infiltration makes them valuable partners for operations that require subtlety and precision rather than simple destructive force. The legacy of the Emperor's children serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers inherent in the pursuit of perfection without moral guidance or spiritual grounding. Their transformation from exemplary warriors into agents of corruption demonstrates how noble ideals can be twisted into justifications for the most heinous acts when pursued without regard for their ultimate consequences. The Legion's fall illustrates the seductive nature of gradual corruption, showing how small compromises and incremental changes can lead to complete spiritual destruction over time. The development of sonic weaponry among the Emperor's children represented a natural evolution of their obsession with perfection, as these fallen warriors discovered that sound itself could be transformed into the ultimate instrument of both destruction and artistic expression. The technology emerged from their encounters with alien civilizations during the Great Crusade, particularly their campaign against the Lair, whose biotechnology included organic sound, producing organs capable of generating frequencies that could shatter crystalline structures and induce paralysis in nervous systems. The Emperor's Children's tech marines and artificers, already renowned for their ability to enhance and modify equipment beyond standard specifications, began experimenting with ways to incorporate these principles into their existing arsenal. The initial prototypes of sonic weapons appeared crude compared to the refined instruments that would later become synonymous with Slaaneshi warfare. Early versions consisted of modified bolters equipped with resonance chambers and harmonic amplifiers salvaged from Lair biotechnology. These weapons produced discordant sounds that could disorient enemies and cause structural damage to fortifications, but they lacked the precision and aesthetic qualities that the Emperor's Children demanded from their equipment. The weapon's effects proved unpredictable, sometimes producing devastating results, while other times generating nothing more than unpleasant noise. The breakthrough in sonic weapon development occurred when the Legion's artificers began to understand sound not merely as vibrations through air, but as a fundamental force that could be shaped and directed with the same precision as any other form of energy. They discovered that specific frequencies could resonate with the molecular structure of different materials, causing targeted destruction while leaving other substances untouched. More significantly, they learned that certain harmonic combinations could affect the human nervous system directly, bypassing physical defenses to attack the mind and soul of their targets. The philosophy behind sonic warfare extended far beyond simple tactical considerations, as the Emperor's Children viewed their weapons as instruments in a vast symphony of destruction that elevated combat to the level of high art. Each battle became a composition requiring careful orchestration, with different weapon types contributing specific tones and rhythms to create overall harmonic effects that satisfied both military objectives and aesthetic requirements. The warriors who wielded these weapons underwent extensive training, not just in marksmanship and tactics, but in musical theory and acoustic engineering that allowed them to understand their role within larger sonic arrangements. Noise Marines emerged as specialists dedicated entirely to the mastery of sonic warfare. Their enhanced physiology adapted through surgical modification and chaos corruption to better interface with their weapons and withstand the intense acoustic environments they created. These warriors underwent procedures that replaced their standard Space Marine hearing apparatus with sophisticated acoustic processing organs capable of analyzing and manipulating sound waves with supernatural precision. Their vocal cords received enhancement through implanted resonance chambers that allowed them to produce sounds no human throat could generate, turning their battle cries into weapons as deadly as any blade or bolter. The psychological transformation required to become a Noise Marine proved as significant as the physical modifications, as these warriors learned to perceive reality through acoustic rather than visual frameworks. They developed the ability to navigate in complete darkness using echolocation, identify enemy positions through the analysis of reflected sound waves, and communicate with their squad mates through subsonic frequencies that remained undetectable to conventional monitoring equipment. Their enhanced hearing allowed them to detect heartbeats, breathing patterns, and nervous system activity from considerable distances, making them supremely effective hunters and infiltrators. Sonic blasters represented the most common sonic weapon employed by Noise Marines, appearing as heavily modified bolters equipped with elaborate acoustic focusing arrays and harmonic amplification systems. These weapons generated concentrated sound waves capable of liquefying organic tissue, shattering bone, and disrupting the electrical activity of nervous systems. The acoustic energy produced by sonic blasters could penetrate most forms of armor by inducing resonance frequencies that caused protective materials to vibrate themselves apart at the molecular level. The visual appearance of sonic blasters reflected their wielders' obsession with aesthetic perfection, featuring elaborate decorative elements that served both functional and artistic purposes. The weapon's acoustic focusing arrays resembled musical instruments as much as military equipment, with curved surfaces and resonance chambers designed according to mathematical principles that maximized both sonic output and visual appeal. Many sonic blasters incorporated living components grown from chaos-corrupted biotechnology, creating weapons that could adapt their acoustic properties in response to battlefield conditions and their wielders' emotional states. The ammunition used by sonic blasters consisted of specialized shells containing harmonic resonators and acoustic amplifiers rather than conventional explosive charges. When fired, these projectiles generated expanding waves of destructive sound that could affect multiple targets simultaneously while creating complex interference patterns that enhanced the overall acoustic environment of the battlefield. The shells could be programmed to produce specific frequencies tailored to exploit known weaknesses in enemy equipment or physiology, making each shot a precisely calculated component of larger sonic compositions. Blastmasters represented the heavy weapons equivalent of sonic warfare technology, massive instruments of destruction that combined the firepower of conventional heavy bolters with acoustic capabilities that could level entire structures through targeted frequency manipulation. These weapons required teams of specially trained noise marines to operate effectively, as their complex acoustic systems demanded constant adjustment and coordination to maintain optimal performance. The Blastmaster's appearance suggested a fusion of artillery piece and pipe organ, with multiple resonance chambers and harmonic modulators arranged in configurations that created both devastating firepower and haunting musical effects. The operation of a Blastmaster required its crew to function as a musical ensemble, with each operator responsible for specific aspects of the weapon's acoustic output. The primary gunner controlled the weapon's targeting systems and overall frequency selection, while secondary operators managed harmonic modulation, resonance chamber alignment, and acoustic amplification. This collaborative approach to weapons operation reflected the Emperor's children's emphasis on achieving perfection through coordinated effort, transforming the act of firing heavy weapons into a form of performance art. Blastmasters could operate in multiple firing modes depending on tactical requirements and the crew's artistic vision for each engagement. The weapon's standard mode produced concentrated beams of acoustic energy capable of punching through heavy armor and fortified positions, while its area effect mode generated expanding waves of destructive sound that could suppress entire enemy formations. Advanced operators learned to create complex acoustic interference patterns by coordinating their fire with other Blastmasters, generating harmonic resonances that could bring down massive structures or induce widespread panic among enemy forces. The most sophisticated Blastmaster crews developed signature acoustic compositions that became their personal trademarks on the battlefield, complex arrangements of frequencies and harmonics that achieved specific tactical effects while expressing the operator's individual artistic vision. These compositions often incorporated elements drawn from pre-heresy musical traditions, corrupted and transformed into weapons of war that retained enough familiar structure to create disturbing recognition in listeners who survived the initial assault. Doom sirens represented the most personal and intimate form of sonic weapon, devices that integrated directly with the wielder's enhanced vocal apparatus to transform their voice into an instrument of destruction. These weapons appeared as elaborate throat and chest modifications that combined mechanical components with corrupted biotechnology, creating systems that could amplify and focus the user's vocal output into devastating acoustic attacks. The visual appearance of Doom sirens varied significantly between individual users, as each device was custom crafted to complement its wielder's specific physiological characteristics and aesthetic preferences. The installation of a Doom siren required extensive surgical modification that fundamentally altered the recipient's respiratory and vocal systems. The procedure involved the implantation of resonance chambers within the chest cavity, harmonic modulators throughout the throat and neck, and acoustic focusing arrays that replaced the standard Space Marine helmet's communication systems. These modifications allowed the user to produce sounds ranging from subsonic frequencies that could induce fear and disorientation to ultrasonic emissions capable of shattering crystalline structures and disrupting electronic systems. Noise Marines equipped with doom sirens developed unique fighting styles that incorporated vocal attacks as seamlessly as conventional weapons, using their enhanced voices to disorient enemies before closing to melee range or to provide acoustic support for their squad mates' ranged attacks. The psychological impact of facing opponents whose battle cries could literally kill proved devastating to enemy morale, as conventional troops found themselves unable to distinguish between harmless vocalizations and potentially lethal acoustic assaults. The most accomplished Doom Siren users learned to modulate their vocal output in real time, creating complex acoustic effects that served multiple purposes simultaneously. They could generate subsonic frequencies that induced fear and confusion while producing audible harmonics that coordinated their squad's movements and provided tactical information through coded acoustic signals. Advanced practitioners developed the ability to create acoustic illusions that made single voices sound like entire choruses or generated directional effects that made their calls appear to originate from multiple locations simultaneously. The effects of sonic warfare on enemy forces extended far beyond simple physical damage, as the acoustic environments created by Noise Marine weapons attacked targets on psychological and spiritual levels that conventional armaments could not reach. The constant exposure to precisely crafted frequencies designed to exploit human nervous system vulnerabilities induced states of terror, confusion, and despair that could break enemy formations even when the physical damage inflicted remained minimal. Soldiers who survived encounters with Noise Marines often reported persistent auditory hallucinations and psychological trauma that rendered them unfit for further combat service. The acoustic signatures produced by sonic weapons created battlefield environments that favored chaos forces while disadvantaging their opponents in ways that went beyond simple noise pollution. The complex harmonic structures generated by coordinated sonic attacks interfered with Imperial communication systems, disrupted targeting computers, and created acoustic dead zones where conventional weapons suffered reduced effectiveness. These environmental effects accumulated over the course of extended engagements, gradually transforming battlefields into acoustic landscapes that reflected Slaaneshi aesthetic principles while providing tactical advantages to Noise Marine forces. Imperial forces that encountered sonic weapons for the first time often struggled to develop effective countermeasures, as their training and equipment focused on defending against conventional ballistic and energy weapons rather than acoustic attacks. Standard power armor provided minimal protection against sound waves that could penetrate solid barriers through resonance effects, while traditional defensive positions offered little shelter from weapons that could attack from multiple directions simultaneously through acoustic reflection and interference patterns. The development of effective countermeasures against sonic weapons required Imperial forces to fundamentally reconsider their approach to battlefield protection and tactical doctrine. Some units began employing acoustic dampening equipment and white noise generators to disrupt enemy sonic attacks, while others adopted hit-and-run tactics designed to prevent Noise Marines from establishing the acoustic dominance necessary for their most devastating effects. These adaptations proved only partially successful, as the constantly evolving nature of sonic weapon technology made it difficult to develop permanent solutions to the threat they represented. The psychological effects of sonic warfare proved particularly devastating to Imperial Guard units, whose members lacked the enhanced physiology and mental conditioning that allowed Space Marines to better resist acoustic attacks. Entire regiments exposed to concentrated sonic assaults suffered casualties not from physical wounds, but from psychological breakdown induced by exposure to frequencies specifically designed to exploit human neurological vulnerabilities. The survivors of such encounters often required extensive rehabilitation before they could return to active duty, and many never fully recovered from their experiences. The impact of sonic weapons on the Noise Marines themselves represented a complex interaction between enhancement and degradation that reflected Slaanesh's fundamental nature as a deity of excess and corruption. The constant exposure to intense acoustic environments gradually altered their physiology and psychology in ways that enhanced their combat effectiveness, while pushing them further from their original humanity. Their enhanced hearing allowed them to perceive acoustic subtleties that normal humans could never detect, but this hypersensitivity also made them dependent on increasingly extreme auditory stimulation to achieve satisfaction. Long-term exposure to sonic weapon environments caused permanent changes in noise marine physiology that went beyond the original surgical modifications required for their weapon's operation. Their nervous systems adapted to process acoustic information with supernatural efficiency, allowing them to navigate and fight effectively in sound-based environments that would incapacitate normal humans. However, these adaptations came with corresponding losses in other sensory capabilities, as their enhanced hearing dominated their perceptual framework to the exclusion of visual and tactile input. The addiction to acoustic stimulation that developed among veteran noise marines created a feedback loop of escalating intensity that drove them to seek ever more extreme auditory experiences. Warriors who had once found satisfaction in the controlled harmonics of coordinated sonic attacks gradually required exposure to chaotic noise and discordant frequencies that pushed the boundaries of what their enhanced physiology could withstand. This progression toward acoustic extremism often culminated in complete sensory overload that left the affected Marines capable of responding only to the most intense sonic stimuli. The weapons themselves underwent constant modification and enhancement as their wielders sought to achieve new levels of acoustic perfection, incorporating materials and technologies that existed only within the warp's reality-defying environment. Noise Marines would spend years refining their instruments, adjusting harmonic ratios and resonance frequencies to create personal acoustic signatures that reflected their individual artistic vision while maximizing battlefield effectiveness. These customized weapons became extensions of their wielders' personalities, each one unique in its acoustic properties and visual appearance. The integration of sonic weapons into larger tactical frameworks required Noise Marine forces to develop new approaches to battlefield coordination that emphasized acoustic harmony over traditional command structures. Squads learned to operate as musical ensembles, with each member contributing specific frequencies and rhythms to create overall compositions that achieved tactical objectives while satisfying aesthetic requirements. This collaborative approach to combat created unit cohesion based on artistic rather than purely military principles, generating loyalty and cooperation that transcended normal hierarchical relationships. The strategic implications of sonic warfare extended beyond individual battles to encompass broader campaigns and long-term objectives, as the acoustic environments created by Noise Marine operations could affect entire planetary populations over extended periods. The persistent exposure to carefully crafted frequencies designed to induce specific psychological states gradually altered the behavior and attitudes of civilian populations, making them more susceptible to chaos corruption while reducing their willingness to resist traitor forces. These population-level effects made sonic weapons valuable tools for conquest and occupation, as well as direct military engagement. The relationship between Slaanesh and the Eldar transcends the typical predator-prey dynamic found between chaos gods and mortal species, representing instead a fundamental corruption of the natural order that binds creator and creation in an eternal dance of hunger and desperation. When the Dark Prince burst into existence during the final moments of the Eldar Empire's decadent collapse, the psychic birth scream that tore reality asunder did more than simply destroy billions of lives and consume entire star systems within the Eye of Terror. The cataclysmic event fundamentally altered the spiritual architecture of every surviving Eldar soul, creating an unbreakable connection that ensures each member of the species remains forever marked as the personal property of She Who Thirsts. This metaphysical bond operates on levels that transcend physical distance or dimensional barriers, as Slaanesh's claim upon Eldar souls exists as a fundamental aspect of their spiritual essence, rather than an external curse that might be lifted through conventional means. The moment of the god's birth rewrote the basic parameters that govern Eldar existence, transforming what had once been a natural cycle of death and spiritual renewal into a horrific trap that delivers every departing soul directly into the maw of their species' destroyer. The connection manifests as a constant psychic resonance that allows Slaanesh to track individual Eldar across the galaxy, sensing their emotional states, monitoring their activities, and savoring their struggles against an inevitable fate. The intensity of this spiritual marking varies among different Eldar populations based on their proximity to the original catastrophe and their subsequent exposure to chaos influence. Those whose ancestors lived within the core regions of the ancient empire carry the deepest spiritual scarring, their souls bearing psychic wounds that pulse with Slaaneshi corruption and make them particularly attractive to their patrons' attention. Eldar from frontier worlds and distant colonies often display less severe marking, though none escape entirely from the fundamental alteration that occurred during the fall. The practical implications of this eternal bondage force every Eldar to live with the constant awareness that death represents not peaceful rest or spiritual transcendence, but immediate consumption by an entity whose hunger for their essence knows no satisfaction. This knowledge shapes every aspect of Eldar society and individual psychology, creating cultures built around the desperate need to protect souls that remain perpetually vulnerable to predation. The various Eldar factions have developed radically different approaches to managing this existential threat, each one representing a unique interpretation of how their species might survive or ultimately overcome their cursed relationship with the Dark Prince. Craftworld Eldar have constructed perhaps the most comprehensive and sophisticated system for protecting their souls from Slaanesh's hunger, developing technologies and cultural practices that work together to create multiple layers of spiritual defense. The foundation of their survival strategy rests upon the Infinity Circuit, a vast psychic network that spans each Craftworld's Wraithbone structure and serves as both a repository for departed souls and a collective consciousness that guides the living. This crystalline matrix functions as a spiritual sanctuary where Eldar souls can find refuge after death, protected by the combined psychic strength of countless ancestors and the Craftworld's own semi-sentient awareness. The construction of infinity circuits requires materials and techniques that exist nowhere else in the galaxy, as the Wraithbone substrate must be grown rather than manufactured through conventional industrial processes. This psychoactive material responds directly to Eldar thoughts and emotions, allowing skilled bonesingers to shape it into complex structures that can channel and contain psychic energy with perfect efficiency. The process of creating new sections of Infinity Circuit involves entire communities of Craftworld inhabitants working in harmony to guide the Wraithbone's growth, their collective will shaping the material into configurations that can safely house and protect departing souls. Each Infinity Circuit develops its own unique characteristics over the millennia of its existence, as the accumulated presence of countless souls gradually influences the network's personality and capabilities. Some circuits become renowned for their wisdom and guidance, offering sage counsel to the living through carefully modulated psychic emanations. Others develop more martial temperaments, their accumulated warrior spirits providing tactical insights and battle fury to Craftworld defenders during times of crisis. The most ancient circuits achieve levels of consciousness that approach true artificial intelligence, becoming partners rather than mere tools in their Craftworld's ongoing struggle for survival. The relationship between living Eldar and their Infinity Circuit extends far beyond simple spiritual insurance, as the network serves as a repository of cultural memory and accumulated knowledge that spans thousands of years. Craftworld inhabitants can access this vast library of experience through meditation and ritual communion, drawing upon the wisdom of their ancestors to guide important decisions and preserve ancient traditions. The circuit's influence permeates every aspect of Craftworld life, from the guidance provided to young Eldar choosing their first path to the strategic planning that governs military campaigns and diplomatic initiatives. Spirit stones represent the most visible and personal aspect of Eldar soul protection technology, serving as individual psychic containers that capture and preserve each person's essence at the moment of death. These crystalline devices appear as elegant gems that reflect their owner's personality and spiritual development, with colors and internal structures that shift and change throughout the bearer's lifetime. The creation of each spirit stone requires months of careful preparation by skilled artisans who must attune the crystal matrix to the specific psychic resonance of its intended owner, creating a perfect harmonic match that ensures complete soul capture when death occurs. The process of spirit stone creation begins during an Eldar's childhood, when Farseers and other psychic specialists examine the young person's spiritual aura to determine the optimal crystal configuration for their eventual needs. The selected raw materials undergo extensive purification and enhancement procedures that remove any impurities or flaws that might compromise the stone's protective capabilities. Master craftsmen then shape the crystal using techniques that combine advanced technology with psychic manipulation, creating internal structures that mirror the complexity of Eldar consciousness while providing absolute protection against external spiritual predation. Each spirit stone bears unique identifying characteristics that reflect its owner's personality, achievements, and spiritual development, creating artifacts that serve as both protective devices and personal memorials. The stone's appearances change throughout their bearer's lifetimes, developing new facets and internal patterns that record significant experiences and emotional growth. Master artisans can read these crystalline chronicles like books, using the accumulated visual data to understand the deceased's life story and determine the most appropriate placement for their stone within the Craftworld's greater spiritual architecture. The integration of spirit stones into the Infinity Circuit requires careful placement and proper ritual preparation to ensure that the departed soul can find its intended destination within the network's vast psychic landscape. Skilled technicians known as Wraithseers oversee this process, using their enhanced psychic abilities to guide newly arrived souls through the circuit's complex pathways and help them establish connections with appropriate spiritual communities. The successful integration of a spirit stone marks the beginning of the soul's new existence as part of the Craftworld's collective consciousness, though individual identity and memory remain intact within the greater whole. The path system represents the Craftworld Eldar's most sophisticated approach to managing their species' inherent psychic sensitivity and emotional intensity, while denying Slaanesh the spiritual emanations that feed the Dark Prince's power. This cultural framework channels Eldar passions and abilities into carefully controlled outlets that allow for personal growth and achievement, while maintaining strict boundaries that prevent the kind of obsessive excess that originally birthed their destroyer. The system recognizes that Eldar psychology requires intense engagement with chosen pursuits, but structures this engagement in ways that promote spiritual health rather than dangerous fixation. Each path represents a specific aspect of Eldar existence, from the martial disciplines of the warrior path to the creative expressions found along the path of the artist. Individuals typically spend decades mastering each path they choose to walk, developing skills and insights that would require centuries for members of other species to achieve. The key to the system's effectiveness lies in its emphasis on eventual transition, as Eldar are expected to complete their studies on each path and move on to new areas of exploration, rather than becoming permanently fixated on single disciplines. The path of the warrior encompasses numerous sub-disciplines that allow Eldar to explore different aspects of martial excellence, while maintaining the emotional control necessary to avoid Khorne's influence and the perfectionist obsessions that might attract Slaanesh's attention. Aspect warriors who walk this path undergo training that combines physical conditioning with spiritual discipline, learning to channel their natural aggression and competitive instincts into forms that serve their Craftworld's defense while protecting their own souls from corruption. Each aspect temple maintains its own traditions and techniques, but all share the common goal of creating warriors who can fight with deadly effectiveness while remaining spiritually pure. The Dire Avengers represent the most common aspect warriors, specializing in ranged combat techniques that emphasize precision and tactical coordination over individual glory. Their training focuses on the development of perfect marksmanship and battlefield awareness, allowing them to eliminate threats with minimal risk to themselves and their comrades. The Aspect's philosophy emphasizes the warrior as an instrument of their craft worlds, rather than an individual seeking personal achievement, creating a mindset that naturally resists the kind of pride and ambition that chaos uses to corrupt other species. Howling Banshees embody the Eldar capacity for controlled fury, channeling their species' potential for emotional extremism into a focused weapon against their enemies. These warriors learn to generate psychic screams that can paralyze opponents with terror while maintaining perfect control over their own emotional states. Their combat techniques incorporate acrobatic movements and lightning-fast strikes that overwhelm enemies through speed and precision rather than brute force, reflecting the Eldar preference for elegant solutions over crude applications of power. Fire dragons specialize in the destruction of enemy armor and fortifications, wielding weapons that can melt through the heaviest protection with concentrated thermal energy. Their training emphasizes patience and tactical thinking, as their role often requires them to identify the precise moment when their intervention can achieve maximum effect. The Aspect's philosophy focuses on the warrior as a tool of surgical precision rather than indiscriminate destruction, teaching its adherents to value efficiency and effectiveness over spectacular displays of firepower. Striking Scorpions represent the craftworld's capacity for stealth and infiltration, learning to move unseen through enemy territory and strike at vulnerable targets with perfect timing. Their training combines physical conditioning with mental discipline that allows them to remain motionless for hours while waiting for the optimal moment to attack. The Aspect's emphasis on patience and careful planning provides natural protection against the impulsiveness and instant gratification that characterize Slaaneshi corruption. The Path of the Seer attracts Eldar with powerful psychic abilities who seek to develop their talents in service to their craftworld's guidance and protection. This path requires exceptional mental discipline and spiritual strength, as Seers must learn to perceive the currents of fate and possibility that flow through the warp without becoming lost in the chaotic energies they manipulate. The training process spans centuries and involves gradual exposure to increasingly complex psychic phenomena, building the mental fortifications necessary to resist chaos corruption while developing the skills needed to guide their people through an uncertain future. Farseers represent the ultimate expression of the Seer path, having developed their prescient abilities to levels that allow them to perceive multiple possible futures and guide their craftworld's actions to achieve the most favorable outcomes. Their enhanced perception comes at the cost of gradual separation from normal existence, as their consciousness becomes increasingly focused on abstract possibilities rather than immediate physical reality. This transformation provides natural protection against Slaanesh's influence, as Farseers develop a detached perspective that values long-term outcomes over immediate sensation or gratification. Warlocks serve as the bridge between the Seer path and the path of the warrior, combining psychic abilities with martial training to create battlefield leaders capable of coordinating both physical and spiritual aspects of combat. Their dual nature requires exceptional balance and self-control, as they must master both the emotional intensity required for effective warfare and the mental discipline necessary for safe psychic manipulation. This challenging combination creates individuals with natural resistance to chaos corruption, as their training emphasizes the importance of maintaining perfect equilibrium between competing impulses. The Path of the Outcast represents a necessary safety valve within craftworld society, providing an outlet for individuals who find themselves unable to adapt to the structured existence that the path system requires. These Eldar leave their craftworlds to explore the galaxy as rangers, corsairs, or independent operators, seeking experiences and perspectives that cannot be found within the confines of their birth communities. While this lifestyle carries increased risks of chaos corruption, it also serves to prevent the kind of stagnation and repression that might make entire craftworld populations vulnerable to spiritual predation. Rangers undergo training that prepares them for extended periods of solitary existence in hostile environments, developing survival skills and mental resilience that allow them to operate independently while maintaining their connection to craftworld values and traditions. Their role as scouts and intelligence gatherers serves their home communities while providing the individual freedom and challenge that their personalities require. The Ranger lifestyle naturally selects for individuals with strong willpower and clear moral foundations, as those lacking these qualities rarely survive their first decades of independent operation. Corsair bands represent a more extreme form of outcast existence, as these groups reject craftworld authority entirely while maintaining their Eldar cultural identity and spiritual practices. Their piratical lifestyle involves constant danger and moral ambiguity that tests their resistance to chaos corruption on a daily basis. Yet many Corsair leaders develop reputations for honor and integrity that rival those of craftworld heroes. The freedom to make their own choices and face the consequences of their actions appeals to Eldar who find craftworld society too restrictive, while their continued adherence to Eldar values demonstrates that the path system's principles can be maintained even outside its formal structure. The Drukhari of Camorra have chosen a radically different approach to surviving their cursed relationship with Slaanesh, embracing the very excesses that birthed their destroyer while using constant acts of torture and depravity to feed their souls with stolen suffering. This strategy acknowledges the fundamental truth that Eldar souls naturally generate the psychic emanations that Slaanesh craves, but seeks to satisfy that hunger through the consumption of others' pain, rather than allowing the Dark Prince to claim Drukhari essence directly. The system creates a sustainable cycle of predation that keeps Drukhari souls marginally ahead of their patron's appetite, though it requires constant vigilance and increasingly extreme acts to maintain its effectiveness. The Dark City of Camorra serves as both sanctuary and prison for the Drukhari, its reality-defying architecture existing within a pocket dimension that provides protection from direct assault, while trapping its inhabitants in an environment where their survival depends entirely on their ability to inflict suffering upon others. The city's structure reflects the twisted nature of its inhabitants, featuring spires that stretch into impossible heights, bridges that span dimensions rather than mere physical space, and districts where the laws of physics bend to accommodate the desires of their rulers. The constant presence of captured slaves and tortured victims creates an atmosphere saturated with pain and despair that nourishes Drukhari souls while repelling the direct attention of she who thirsts. Cabal politics dominate Drukhari society, as these noble houses compete for resources, territory, and opportunities to conduct raids into real space. Each cabal maintains its own military forces, slave pens, and torture facilities, creating a complex web of alliances and rivalries that ensures the Dark City remains in constant turmoil. This political instability serves multiple purposes, preventing any single faction from gaining enough power to threaten the overall balance, while ensuring that Drukhari society maintains the level of conflict and suffering necessary to sustain their spiritual protection scheme. The Cabal of the Black Heart stands as the most powerful faction within Camorra, controlling vast territories within the Dark City and commanding fleets capable of striking targets across the galaxy. Under the leadership of Asdrubal Vecht, this organization has perfected the art of large-scale raiding operations that capture thousands of slaves while inflicting maximum psychological trauma on target populations. Their success stems from their ability to coordinate complex multi-dimensional assaults that exploit weaknesses in Imperial defenses while maximizing the terror and suffering generated by their attacks. Witch cults represent a different aspect of Drukhari society, focusing on the perfection of combat techniques and the creation of elaborate gladiatorial spectacles that provide entertainment for the Dark City's inhabitants while generating the suffering necessary for spiritual sustenance. These organizations maintain vast arenas where captured slaves fight for the amusement of Drukhari audiences, their deaths serving both as entertainment and as spiritual nourishment for the spectators. The most successful witch cults develop reputations for creating particularly innovative and aesthetically pleasing forms of combat, their performances becoming legendary throughout Comora's twisted social circles. Homunculus covens pursue the scientific study of pain and suffering, developing new techniques for extracting maximum agony from their subjects while preserving their lives for extended periods of torment. These organizations function as both research institutions and service providers, offering their expertise to other Drukhari factions while conducting their own experiments in the nature of sensation and consciousness. Their work pushes the boundaries of what living beings can endure, creating new forms of torture that generate unprecedented levels of psychic emanation while maintaining their subjects' viability for future use. The constant need for fresh victims drives Drukhari raiding culture, as their survival depends entirely on their ability to capture and torment members of other species. These operations require careful planning and precise execution, as unsuccessful raids not only fail to provide necessary spiritual sustenance, but also risk exposing raiding parties to retaliation from their intended victims. The most successful Drukhari raiders develop reputations for their ability to strike without warning, capture maximum numbers of victims, and escape before effective resistance can be organized. Drukhari technology reflects their society's focus on inflicting suffering while maintaining their own survival, featuring weapons and equipment designed to maximize pain while minimizing the risk of accidentally killing valuable victims. Their vehicles incorporate speed and stealth capabilities that allow them to strike quickly and withdraw before enemies can respond effectively, while their personal equipment emphasizes precision and control over raw destructive power. The aesthetic design of Drukhari technology celebrates cruelty and sadism, featuring decorative elements that serve both to intimidate enemies and to remind users of their society's fundamental values. The Inari represent the newest and most controversial faction within Eldar society, as these revolutionaries seek to awaken Ennead, the Eldar god of the dead, and use this nascent deity's power to destroy Slaanesh once and for all. This faction draws members from all existing Eldar populations, including Craftworld inhabitants, Drukhari, Corsairs, and even some Harlequins, united by their belief that their species' salvation lies not in eternal vigilance against their destroyer, but in active resistance through the cultivation of their own divine champion. The movement's emergence has created unprecedented cooperation between traditionally hostile Eldar factions, while generating fierce opposition from conservative elements who view the Inari's methods as dangerously radical. The theological foundation of the Inari movement rests upon ancient Eldar prophecies that speak of a god of endings who will arise from the accumulated souls of the dead to challenge she who thirsts in final battle. These prophecies suggest that Ennead's power grows with each Eldar death, as the departed souls contribute their essence to the nascent deity's development rather than being consumed by Slaanesh. The Inari interpret recent events as signs that this prophesied awakening has begun, pointing to supernatural phenomena and psychic disturbances as evidence that their god stirs within the collective unconscious of their species. Ivrain, the daughter of Shades, serves as the primary prophet and leader of the Inari movement, her own resurrection from death providing tangible proof of Ennead's growing power. Her ability to return from apparent destruction has inspired thousands of Eldar to join the faction, while her psychic connection to the nascent god allows her to channel divine power in ways that no living Eldar has achieved since the fall. Her presence on battlefields creates zones of supernatural influence where Ennead's power manifests directly, protecting allied forces while striking down enemies with energies drawn from the realm of the dead. The Unkarn serves as Ennead's primary avatar in the material universe, a manifestation of divine power that appears wherever large numbers of Eldar face destruction. This entity combines the accumulated rage and sorrow of countless departed souls into a focused weapon against the forces of chaos, its presence on battlefields turning desperate last stands into crushing victories for Eldar forces. the Unkarn's appearances remain unpredictable and brief, as the nascent god lacks the full power necessary to maintain permanent manifestations in real space. But each intervention demonstrates the growing potential of the Inari's divine patron. The Visarch functions as the Inari's primary military commander, wielding ancient weapons and armor that channel Ennead's power while leading mixed forces drawn from all Eldar factions. His role requires exceptional diplomatic skills as well as martial prowess, as he must coordinate troops with radically different training, equipment, and cultural backgrounds while maintaining the unity necessary for effective military action. The Visarch's success in creating functional armies from traditionally hostile factions has proven crucial to the Inari's military effectiveness and political credibility. The faction's military operations focus on gathering the Crone Swords, ancient artifacts scattered across the galaxy that supposedly hold the key to Ennead's full awakening. These weapons represent fragments of the original Eldar Pantheon's power, their recovery requiring dangerous expeditions into chaos-controlled territory and battles with some of the galaxy's most powerful supernatural entities. Each successful recovery brings the Inari closer to their ultimate goal, while demonstrating their commitment to active resistance against their species' oppressors. The theological implications of the Inari movement extend far beyond simple military resistance, as their success would fundamentally alter the spiritual architecture that governs Eldar existence. The awakening of Ennead promises to restore the natural cycle of death and rebirth that Slaanesh's birth disrupted, allowing Eldar souls to find peace in death rather than facing eternal torment. This prospect appeals to Eldar across all factions, though many remain skeptical about the movement's chances of success and concerned about the risks involved in challenging a fully mature chaos god. The eternal conflict between the four ruinous powers represents far more than simple competition for dominance within the warp, as each chaos god embodies fundamental aspects of existence that naturally oppose and complement their siblings in ways that create perpetual tension and occasional cooperation. Slaanesh's position as the youngest of these entities places the Dark Prince in a unique situation where established relationships between the Elder Gods must accommodate a new player whose domains overlap with existing territories, while introducing entirely novel concepts of corruption and excess. The resulting dynamics shape not only the internal politics of chaos, but also determine how these supernatural forces manifest their influence throughout the material universe. The relationship between Slaanesh and Khorne represents perhaps the most volatile and contradictory of all inter-deity rivalries, as both gods draw power from violence and conflict, while approaching these concepts from fundamentally incompatible philosophical perspectives. The Blood God's domain encompasses warfare in its purest form, celebrating the honest application of force and the straightforward pursuit of victory through superior martial skill. Khorne's followers embrace violence as an end unto itself, finding spiritual fulfillment in the act of combat regardless of the specific cause or consequence of their battles. This direct approach to bloodshed creates a form of corruption that appeals to warriors seeking glory through strength of arms and the accumulation of honorable victories. Slaanesh's relationship with violence incorporates elements that Khorne finds deeply offensive to his warrior's code, as the Dark Prince treats combat as merely one avenue among many for achieving perfect sensation and aesthetic fulfillment. Where Khornate warriors seek quick, decisive victories that maximize bloodshed while minimizing unnecessary suffering, Slaaneshi combatants prolong engagements to savor every moment of the experience. They transform battlefields into stages for elaborate performances that celebrate the beauty of violence rather than its practical effectiveness, treating enemy deaths as artistic statements rather than tactical necessities. The fundamental difference in their approaches to warfare manifests most clearly in how their respective followers conduct themselves during combat operations. Khornate berserkers charge directly into enemy formations, with weapons designed for maximum lethality, seeking to spill as much blood as possible in the shortest amount of time. Their battle cries express pure rage and bloodlust, while their tactics emphasize overwhelming force applied without hesitation or mercy. These warriors view prolonged combat as wasteful inefficiency that delays the achievement of their primary objective, the taking of skulls for their patron's throne. Slaaneshi warriors approach the same battlefield with entirely different priorities, as they seek to create experiences that transcend mere killing through the incorporation of aesthetic and sensory elements that elevate violence to the level of high art. Their weapons incorporate sonic generators, chemical dispensers, and other devices that enhance the sensory impact of each strike while creating visual and auditory effects that transform combat into performance. These combatants move with choreographed precision that prioritizes elegance and style over simple effectiveness, treating their enemies as partners in elaborate dances of death rather than obstacles to be eliminated as quickly as possible. The incompatibility between these approaches creates situations where Khornate and Slaaneshi forces cannot effectively cooperate even when their strategic objectives align perfectly. Joint operations between the two factions typically devolve into conflicts between supposed allies, as Khornate commanders become frustrated with their Slaaneshi counterparts' elaborate tactics, while Slaaneshi leaders view Khornate methods as crude and artistically bankrupt. These internal disputes often prove more destructive than enemy resistance, as both factions possess intimate knowledge of their allies' capabilities and weaknesses that allows them to inflict devastating damage when cooperation breaks down. The theological implications of this rivalry extend beyond simple tactical disagreements to encompass fundamental questions about the nature of violence and its role in the cosmic order. Khorne represents violence as a natural force that requires no justification beyond its own existence, viewing bloodshed as the ultimate expression of strength and the primary method for determining superiority between competing entities. This philosophy treats war as a sacred activity that purifies participants through the honest application of force, while eliminating weakness from the universe through natural selection. Slaanesh's perspective on violence incorporates it into a broader framework of experience and sensation that treats combat as one element among many in the pursuit of perfect existence. The Dark Prince views Khorne's approach as unnecessarily limiting, arguing that violence without aesthetic consideration or sensory enhancement represents a waste of the profound experiences that conflict can provide. This philosophical difference creates theological debates between their respective cults that often escalate into armed conflicts, as each faction seeks to prove the superiority of their patron's approach through practical demonstration. The rivalry between Slaanesh and Tzeentch operates on more subtle levels than the direct confrontation that characterizes the Dark Prince's relationship with Khorne, as both deities appreciate complexity and sophistication in their methods of corruption and control. The Changer of Ways rules over mutation, sorcery, and the endless possibilities that change can create, approaching corruption through elaborate schemes that unfold across centuries or millennia to achieve objectives that might remain hidden even from the participants in his plots. Tzeentch's followers embrace transformation as the fundamental nature of existence, seeking to reshape themselves and their surroundings according to visions that promise ultimate enlightenment through constant evolution. Slaanesh's pursuit of perfection often requires the kind of radical transformation that falls squarely within Tzeentch's domain, as the Dark Prince's followers frequently seek to transcend the limitations imposed by their original forms through surgical modification, alchemical enhancement, or psychic evolution. The boundary between Slaaneshi perfectionism and Tzeentchian mutation becomes blurred when cultists pursue idealized versions of themselves that require fundamental alterations to their physical and mental architecture. This overlap creates opportunities for cooperation between the two factions, while generating conflicts over which deity deserves credit for particular achievements in transformation. The intellectual rivalry between these gods manifests through competing philosophies regarding the nature of change and its ultimate purpose within the cosmic order. Tzeentch views transformation as an end unto itself, celebrating the endless possibilities that mutation and evolution can create, while maintaining that the process of change holds greater significance than any particular outcome it might produce. The architect of fate schemes often involve elaborate transformations that serve no apparent purpose beyond demonstrating the power of change to reshape reality according to supernatural will. Slaanesh approaches transformation as a tool for achieving specific objectives related to the pursuit of perfect sensation and aesthetic fulfillment, treating change as valuable only insofar as it contributes to the realization of idealized visions. The Dark Prince's followers undergo modifications designed to enhance their ability to experience pleasure, inflict pain, or achieve artistic excellence rather than embracing mutation for its own sake. This goal-oriented approach to transformation conflicts with Tzeentch's philosophy of change as an inherent good, creating theological disputes that reflect deeper disagreements about the nature of existence and improvement. The practical implications of this rivalry become apparent in how their respective cults approach the corruption of imperial institutions and the recruitment of new followers. Tzeentchian conspiracies typically involve complex networks of agents working toward objectives that remain hidden even from most participants, with individual cultists receiving instructions that make sense only within the context of larger schemes they cannot perceive. These operations unfold across decades or centuries, gradually reshaping target organizations through accumulated small changes that eventually produce dramatic transformations in institutional culture and objectives. Slaaneshi infiltration efforts focus on identifying and exploiting specific individuals whose personal ambitions or desires can be channeled toward the Dark Prince's service, using targeted corruption campaigns that address each recruit's particular psychological vulnerabilities. These operations achieve faster results than Tzeentchian schemes, but require more direct involvement from cult leadership and create greater risks of detection by imperial authorities. The difference in approach reflects the fundamental distinction between Tzeentch's patient manipulation of abstract possibilities and Slaanesh's immediate engagement with concrete desires and sensations. The competition between these methodologies creates situations where Tzeentchian and Slaaneshi operations interfere with each other despite sharing similar ultimate objectives. A carefully orchestrated Tzeentchian plot to corrupt a planetary government through gradual institutional change might be disrupted by Slaaneshi cultists who recruit key officials through direct appeals to their personal ambitions. Similarly, Slaaneshi efforts to establish influence within military organizations could be undermined by Tzeentchian agents, whose schemes require the preservation of existing command structures for their own purposes. The relationship between Slaanesh and Nurgle represents perhaps the most complex and philosophically rich of all Chaos God rivalries, as both deities deal with fundamental aspects of existence while approaching these concepts from diametrically opposed perspectives. The Plague God embodies decay, disease, and the natural cycle of death and rebirth that governs all living things. Finding beauty in entropy and celebrating the unity that shared suffering can create among diverse populations. Nurgle's domain encompasses the acceptance of mortality and the discovery of joy within circumstances that others might consider unbearable, treating disease and decay as gifts that liberate recipients from the fear of death and the burden of unrealistic expectations. Slaanesh's pursuit of perfection stands in direct opposition to Nurgle's celebration of decay, as the Dark Prince seeks to transcend natural limitations through the achievement of idealized states that deny the reality of entropy and mortality. Where Nurgle finds beauty in the gradual breakdown of complex systems and the return of organized matter to simpler forms, Slaanesh demands the preservation and enhancement of complexity through constant refinement and improvement. This philosophical conflict creates a fundamental tension between acceptance and ambition that manifests in every aspect of their respective domains and follower cultures. The theological implications of this opposition extend to basic questions about the nature of existence and the appropriate response to the universe's inherent limitations. Nurgle teaches that wisdom comes from accepting the inevitability of decay while finding happiness within the constraints that mortality imposes upon all living things. His followers learn to embrace their diseases and deformities as expressions of their patron's love, while developing communities based on shared suffering and mutual support. This approach creates a form of contentment that transcends material circumstances while fostering genuine care and affection between individuals who might otherwise have little in common. Slaanesh's philosophy rejects this acceptance as a form of spiritual weakness that prevents individuals from achieving their full potential through dedicated effort and unwavering commitment to improvement. The Dark Prince teaches that limitations exist only to be overcome through superior will and technique, encouraging followers to pursue perfection regardless of the costs or consequences involved. This approach creates individuals capable of extraordinary achievements while fostering the kind of obsessive dedication that can transform noble ambitions into destructive compulsions. The practical manifestation of this rivalry appears most clearly in how their respective followers approach the treatment of physical and psychological ailments. Nurglite cultists view disease and mental instability as opportunities for spiritual growth that bring sufferers closer to their patron's wisdom, while creating bonds of sympathy with fellow victims. They develop medical practices that focus on helping patients accept their conditions rather than curing them, treating symptoms as expressions of divine, that should be celebrated rather than eliminated. Slaaneshi healers pursue the complete elimination of all imperfections through techniques that promise to restore patients to idealized states of health and beauty. Their medical practices incorporate advanced surgical procedures, alchemical treatments, and psychic manipulations designed to enhance natural capabilities while removing any flaws or limitations that might prevent the achievement of perfect physical and mental condition. These treatments often produce dramatic improvements in patient capabilities while creating dependencies that bind recipients to their Slaaneshi benefactors. The competition between these approaches creates complex situations where both factions claim to offer superior solutions to the same fundamental problems, while pursuing objectives that cannot be reconciled through compromise or cooperation. Nurglite missionaries who establish medical facilities in imperial population centers focus on helping patients find peace and community within their existing circumstances, while Slaaneshi infiltrators promise revolutionary treatments that could eliminate suffering entirely through the application of advanced techniques and superior knowledge. The rivalry between Nurgle and Slaanesh extends to their respective attitudes toward time and the pace of change within the universe. The Plague God operates according to natural cycles that unfold across seasons, years, and decades, viewing patience as a fundamental virtue that allows complex processes to reach their intended conclusions without artificial interference. Nurglite schemes typically involve the gradual spread of influence through organic growth patterns that mirror biological reproduction and ecological succession, creating changes that appear natural and inevitable rather than imposed through external force. Slaanesh's impatience with natural limitations extends to temporal constraints, as the Dark Prince seeks to accelerate all processes that contribute to the achievement of perfect states, while eliminating delays that serve no apparent purpose. Slaaneshi operations often involve techniques for compressing normal developmental timelines through the application of supernatural enhancement and intensive training regimens that produce rapid results at the cost of long-term stability. This approach creates immediate gratification while generating dependencies that require constant maintenance and escalating intensity to sustain their effects. The conflict between these temporal philosophies manifests in how their followers approach long-term planning and resource allocation. Nurglite organizations develop slowly and sustainably, building institutional foundations that can survive disruption while maintaining their essential characteristics across generations of leadership changes. Their growth patterns prioritize stability and resilience over rapid expansion, creating entities that can adapt to changing circumstances while preserving their core values and objectives. Slaaneshi cults pursue aggressive expansion strategies that maximize immediate gains while accepting higher risks of detection and destruction by imperial authorities. Their organizational structures emphasize flexibility and rapid response capabilities that allow them to exploit opportunities as they arise while maintaining the ability to relocate or restructure, when circumstances require dramatic changes. This approach produces faster results, but creates vulnerabilities that more patient competitors can exploit through sustained pressure and careful timing. The personal relationship between Nurgle and Slaanesh carries additional complexity due to the plague god's possession of Isha, the Eldar goddess whose divine essence represents everything that Slaanesh lost when the other members of the Eldar pantheon were consumed during the Dark Prince's birth. This captivity serves multiple purposes for Nurgle, providing him with a constant source of hope and renewal to corrupt, while offering a prize that his youngest sibling desperately covets, but cannot claim through direct action. The situation creates a permanent source of tension between the two gods that influences their relationship in ways that extend far beyond their philosophical disagreements. Isha's presence in Nurgle's garden represents the ultimate expression of the plague god's approach to beauty and perfection, as he seeks to demonstrate that true love involves accepting the beloved's flaws and limitations rather than demanding their transformation according to external standards. The goddess's continued existence despite millennia of exposure to the most virulent diseases ever created serves as proof of Nurgle's ability to preserve what he values while sharing his gifts with those he cherishes. Her suffering becomes a form of communion that brings her closer to her captor, while demonstrating the depth of affection that can develop between beings who share profound experiences. Slaanesh's desire to claim Isha reflects the Dark Prince's conviction that true love requires the beloved's elevation to perfect states that transcend all limitations and flaws. The goddess represents an opportunity to demonstrate superior techniques for expressing affection, while proving that Slaaneshi methods produce better results than Nurglite approaches to relationship development. The Dark Prince's inability to rescue Isha creates a constant source of frustration that drives increasingly elaborate schemes to infiltrate Nurgle's domain, while highlighting the limitations that even Chaos gods must accept when dealing with their siblings. These rivalries between Slaanesh and the other Chaos gods manifest throughout the material universe through the actions of their mortal servants and demon legions, creating conflicts that shape the development of entire sectors while influencing the course of major military campaigns. Imperial forces often find themselves caught between competing Chaos factions, whose internal disputes create opportunities for loyalist victories, while generating unpredictable tactical situations that conventional military doctrine struggles to address effectively. The complex relationships between different Chaos powers ensure that no single faction can achieve complete dominance while maintaining the eternal conflict that feeds all four gods' supernatural appetites. The opening of the Great Rift in the early 42nd millennium fundamentally altered the balance of power between the material universe and the warp, creating unprecedented opportunities for demonic manifestation while unleashing Chaos forces across the galaxy on a scale not witnessed since the Horus Heresy. This massive tear in reality, stretching from the Eye of Terror to the Hadex anomaly, divided the Imperium in half while creating countless smaller warp storms that allowed Slaaneshi demons to pour into real space with alarming frequency. The psychic shockwaves generated by the rift's formation resonated particularly strongly with Slaanesh's domain, as the terror and desperation experienced by billions of Imperial citizens created exactly the kind of intense emotional emanations that the Dark Prince finds most nourishing. The increased warp storm activity following the Great Rift's opening provided Slaaneshi cults with opportunities they had not possessed for millennia, as the weakened barriers between dimensions allowed their demon allies to manifest with minimal ritual preparation or psychic sacrifice. Cult leaders who had previously required months of careful planning and resource accumulation to summon even lesser demons found themselves capable of calling forth keepers of secrets and entire demon legions through relatively simple ceremonies. This dramatic reduction in summoning requirements enabled Slaaneshi forces to launch coordinated attacks across multiple sectors simultaneously, overwhelming Imperial defenses that had been designed to handle isolated cult uprisings rather than galaxy-spanning demon incursions. The plague wars that erupted in Ultramar during this period demonstrated how Slaaneshi forces adapted their traditional tactics to exploit the changed strategic environment while pursuing objectives that complemented rather than competed with other Chaos factions' activities. While Nurglite forces under Mortarian's command focused their assault on the military and industrial infrastructure of the Ultramar sector, Slaaneshi infiltrators concentrated on corrupting the civilian population and cultural institutions that gave the region its distinctive character. This division of labor allowed both factions to pursue their preferred methods of warfare while avoiding the kind of internal conflicts that had historically weakened Chaos offensives. Slaaneshi cult networks that had remained dormant for centuries suddenly activated across Ultramar's worlds, their members emerging from positions within planetary governments, cultural organizations, and military commands to coordinate with the demon forces pouring through newly opened warp rifts. These cultists had spent decades establishing themselves within their respective societies, using their influence to subtly reshape local customs and traditions in ways that would facilitate their eventual revelation as servants of the Dark Prince. The simultaneous activation of these sleeper networks created chaos behind Imperial lines, while providing demon forces with detailed intelligence about defensive positions and strategic vulnerabilities. The corruption campaigns launched during the Plague Wars differed significantly from traditional Slaaneshi infiltration efforts, as the changed warp conditions allowed cultists to employ supernatural enhancement techniques that would have been impossible under normal circumstances. Artists and performers found themselves capable of creating works that carried genuine psychic influence, their paintings and musical compositions serving as vectors for demonic possession, while appearing to be conventional cultural expressions to casual observers. These corrupted artworks spread throughout Ultramar's population centers, creating networks of psychic contamination that weakened local resistance to Chaos influence while preparing the groundwork for larger demon manifestations. The military aspects of Slaaneshi participation in the Plague Wars showcased tactical innovations that incorporated lessons learned from millennia of warfare within the Eye of Terror. Noise Marine warbands coordinated their sonic attacks with Nurglite Plague deployments, using their acoustic weapons to create atmospheric disturbances that enhanced the spread of airborne pathogens while disrupting Imperial communication systems. This cooperation between traditionally rival factions represented a significant evolution in Chaos tactical doctrine, demonstrating how the changed strategic environment encouraged previously incompatible forces to develop new methods of coordination. The Siege of Mukrag itself provided Slaaneshi forces with opportunities to demonstrate their evolved approach to urban warfare, as they infiltrated the fortress monasteries' outer defenses through methods that combined traditional stealth techniques with supernatural enhancement granted by the weakened barriers between dimensions. Small teams of Emperor's Children veterans used sonic weapons to create precisely targeted structural failures in the fortress walls, opening breaches that appeared to be the result of conventional artillery bombardment, while actually representing surgical strikes designed to create specific tactical advantages for follow-up assaults. The psychological warfare conducted by Slaaneshi forces during the siege incorporated elements that took advantage of the Ultramarines' cultural emphasis on honor and martial excellence, as demon princes and chaos champions issued personal challenges to individual space marines that appealed to their pride while isolating them from their battle brothers' support. These dueling scenarios served multiple purposes, removing skilled defenders from the battle while providing Slaaneshi warriors with opportunities to demonstrate their evolved combat techniques to audiences that included both their enemies and potential recruits within the Imperial forces. The 13th Black Crusade's expansion beyond the Cadian Gate created additional opportunities for Slaaneshi forces to pursue their objectives on a galactic scale, as Abaddon's strategic coordination allowed different chaos factions to operate in support of shared goals while maintaining their individual characteristics and priorities. Slaaneshi warbands participated in the Crusades' later phases by targeting imperial worlds whose populations possessed cultural or technological characteristics that made them particularly valuable for corruption purposes. These selective strikes focused on planets with advanced artistic traditions, sophisticated manufacturing capabilities, or strategic locations that could serve as staging areas for future operations. The fall of Cadia itself provided Slaaneshi forces with access to archaeotech facilities and research installations that had been protected by the planet's fortress world status for millennia. The Dark Mechanicum adepts who accompanied Slaaneshi warbands during the planet's final assault discovered manufacturing templates and technological databases that contained information about pre-Age of Strife enhancement techniques and biomodification procedures. This recovered knowledge enabled Slaaneshi tech heretics to develop new methods for creating the kind of sensory enhancement devices and neural interface systems that their patrons' followers required for their most advanced corruption techniques. The strategic implications of Slaaneshi participation in major chaos offensives extended beyond simple military conquest to encompass long-term objectives related to the transformation of imperial society and culture. Unlike other chaos factions that sought to destroy or corrupt existing institutions through direct assault, Slaaneshi forces worked to preserve and redirect these organizations toward purposes that served their patrons' interests while maintaining enough of their original character to avoid triggering immediate imperial response. This approach created sleeper assets within imperial territory that could remain undetected for decades while gradually reshaping their host societies according to Slaaneshi principles. The corruption of imperial nobility during this period reached unprecedented levels as Slaaneshi cults exploited the chaos and uncertainty created by galaxy-wide warfare to approach aristocratic families with offers of protection and enhancement that appeared to be legitimate business arrangements. Noble houses facing economic ruin due to disrupted trade routes found themselves presented with opportunities to restore their fortunes through partnerships with mysterious benefactors who demanded only minor cultural concessions in exchange for substantial financial support. These arrangements typically began with requests for the noble families to sponsor particular artists or cultural events, gradually escalating to more significant commitments as the families became dependent on their patrons' continued support. The enhancement technologies offered to corrupted nobles incorporated biotechnological advances that had been developed within the Eye of Terror through millennia of experimentation with human physiology and consciousness. These treatments promised to extend lifespans, enhance physical capabilities, and expand sensory perception beyond normal human limitations, while maintaining the recipient's essential humanity and social position. The gradual nature of these enhancements prevented recipients from recognizing the extent of their transformation until they had progressed far beyond any possibility of return to their original state. Military commanders across the Imperium found themselves facing similar temptations as Slaaneshi agents approached them with offers of tactical intelligence, advanced weaponry, and strategic coordination that could provide decisive advantages in their campaigns against Chaos forces. These offers appeared to come from legitimate sources within the Imperial hierarchy, supported by documentation and authorization codes that passed all standard verification procedures. The intelligence provided proved accurate and valuable, while the weapons and equipment delivered exceeded all performance specifications and helped achieve significant victories against enemy forces. The corruption process for military personnel typically began with the introduction of combat enhancement drugs and neural interface systems that improved reaction times, accuracy, and tactical awareness while creating subtle dependencies that required regular maintenance and adjustment. The personnel responsible for providing these services gradually introduced philosophical discussions about the nature of warfare and the pursuit of military excellence, presenting ideas that justified increasingly extreme measures in the name of achieving perfect tactical execution and strategic success. The threat posed by these corruption campaigns extended throughout imperial society, as Slaaneshi agents targeted individuals whose professional responsibilities gave them influence over cultural development, educational policy, and social organization. Teachers and scholars found themselves approached by colleagues who offered access to advanced research materials and educational techniques that promised to revolutionize their fields while advancing their personal careers. These materials typically contained genuine insights and practical applications that produced measurable improvements in student performance and institutional effectiveness. The gradual introduction of Slaaneshi philosophical concepts through educational channels created generational changes in imperial society that proved far more dangerous than direct military assault or obvious corruption attempts. Students exposed to these modified curricula developed altered perspectives on personal achievement, social responsibility, and moral decision-making that made them more susceptible to further corruption while maintaining their apparent loyalty to imperial institutions. These educational influences spread through entire planetary populations over decades, creating societies that remained nominally imperial while operating according to principles that served Slaaneshi objectives. The Eldar response to increased Slaaneshi activity following the Great Rift's opening demonstrated both the continued effectiveness of their traditional defensive measures and the growing strain that constant vigilance placed upon their scattered communities. Craftworld Farseers reported unprecedented levels of psychic disturbance as She Who Thirsts attention focused more intensely upon their species, forcing them to expand their soul protection rituals while developing new techniques for shielding their communities from demonic assault. The increased psychic pressure created by the weakened barriers between dimensions made traditional spirit stone technology less reliable, requiring the development of enhanced protection systems that consumed greater resources while providing less certain results. Craftworld military forces found themselves engaged in defensive operations across multiple sectors, as Slaaneshi warbands launched coordinated attacks designed to capture Eldar souls for their patrons' consumption. These assaults typically combined direct military action with sophisticated psychological warfare, intended to provoke the kind of emotional responses that would make Eldar defenders more vulnerable to demonic influence. The attackers demonstrated detailed knowledge of Eldar psychology and tactical doctrine, suggesting long-term intelligence gathering operations that had penetrated even the most secure Craftworld communities. The path system that had protected Craftworld Eldar from chaos corruption for millennia showed signs of strain, as younger generations struggled to maintain the emotional discipline required for safe navigation of their society's rigid structure. The increased psychic pressure created by the Great Rift's opening made it more difficult for Eldar to suppress their natural emotional intensity, leading to higher rates of failure among those attempting to transition between different paths. These failures created populations of Eldar who could not safely remain within Craftworld society while lacking the preparation necessary for successful existence as outcasts. Dark Eldar responses to the changed strategic environment demonstrated their society's adaptability while highlighting the fundamental limitations of their survival strategy. The increased demon activity throughout the galaxy provided Comora's inhabitants with unprecedented opportunities for capturing fresh victims, while creating new risks as competing Chaos factions began targeting the Dark City's outlying territories. Cabal fleets launched increasingly ambitious raiding operations, designed to gather the massive numbers of slaves required to sustain their expanded population, while defending against incursions by demon forces seeking to establish permanent footholds within their dimensional refuge. The political dynamics within Comora shifted significantly as different factions competed for access to the most profitable raiding opportunities, while forming temporary alliances to defend against external threats. Asdrubal Vek's leadership of the Cabal of the Black Heart proved crucial in maintaining the delicate balance that prevented the Dark City from descending into civil war, as his strategic vision enabled different factions to pursue their individual objectives while contributing to collective defense efforts. The Supreme Overlord's manipulation of inter-cabal rivalries created a competitive environment that drove innovation in raiding techniques, while ensuring that no single faction could accumulate enough power to challenge his authority. The Aeldari movement's activities during this period represented the most significant development in Eldar society since the fall, as their success in recovering several crone swords brought them closer to their ultimate objective of awakening Ennead, while demonstrating the practical benefits of cooperation between traditionally hostile factions. The mixed forces commanded by the Visarch achieved victories against chaos opponents that individual Eldar factions could never have accomplished alone, proving that unity could overcome the strategic disadvantages that had plagued their species for millennia. Ivrain's growing connection to Ennead manifested through increasingly powerful displays of divine authority that convinced skeptics throughout Eldar society, while attracting unwanted attention from Slaanesh and other chaos powers. Her ability to resurrect fallen Eldar warriors and protect entire armies from demonic assault provided tangible evidence of her patron's growing strength, while demonstrating the potential for their species to break free from the spiritual bondage that had defined their existence since the fall. These demonstrations of divine power created recruitment opportunities throughout Eldar society, while generating fierce opposition from conservative elements who viewed the Aeldari's methods as dangerously radical. The theological implications of the Aeldari's success extended throughout the galaxy, as other species observed the Eldar's apparent progress toward overthrowing one of the Chaos gods through their own divine champion. Imperial scholars and inquisitors studied reports of Aeldari activities with intense interest, seeking to understand whether similar approaches might be applicable to humanity's struggle against chaos corruption. The possibility that mortal species could actively resist rather than merely defend against chaos influence represented a fundamental shift in strategic thinking that influenced policy development throughout the Imperium's leadership hierarchy. The current state of Slaanesh's influence throughout the galaxy reflects both the opportunities created by the Great Rift's opening and the challenges posed by increased resistance from target populations who have learned to recognize and counter traditional corruption techniques. The Dark Prince's servants continue to adapt their methods to exploit new vulnerabilities while developing enhanced capabilities that take advantage of the weakened barriers between dimensions. The eternal struggle between corruption and resistance continues across countless worlds, with each victory and defeat contributing to the larger pattern of excess and transcendence that defines Slaanesh's domain within the cosmic order. The future of this conflict remains uncertain as all parties involved continue to evolve their capabilities and strategies in response to changing conditions. The weakened state of reality itself ensures that the current millennium will witness unprecedented levels of supernatural activity while testing the resilience of civilizations that have survived previous crises through adaptation and determination. Slaanesh's hunger for new experiences and perfect sensations guarantees that the Dark Prince will continue seeking novel methods of corruption and conquest, while the galaxy's defenders work to develop countermeasures that can preserve their society's essential character while resisting the seductive appeal of excess and transcendence that has claimed so many others throughout history.